Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 483 of the news, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine on the 483rd day. And from what we've been able to hear today, the Ukrainians have admitted that the counteroffensive is ongoing a little bit slower than they anticipated. However, we did hear still today that the Russians did attempt a counterattack in the direction of Lobkove to try and stop advancing Ukrainian forces in that direction, and that counteroffensive was completely quashed by the Ukrainians, and it appears that they still hold the upper hand advantage within that area. Most of those video clips were actually shown largely yesterday, but we did get a couple of extra video clips to talk about the battle happening around Lobkove and the town of Piatikati, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, where the Ukrainians have been making some advances. And to move to Deep State UA, and to explain what we've been seeing here, we saw the other day that the Ukrainian forces have been moving from Lobkove and down the highway towards Piatikati. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. Again, it is a very hard name to pronounce, I'm not even going to lie. But at the same time, we have also heard and seen on video footage and reports from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense that Ukrainian forces have been sweeping wide, trying to claim the ridgeline and get onto equal footing with the town of, and let me make sure I get this name correct, by going here and getting the English name, the town of Zerebianki. They've been trying to move towards that town at the moment, and from what we know, they have been able to claim this ridgeline, and they are now pinning down any Russian reinforcements that are moving on towards the village of Zerebianki. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm so sorry, everyone, but these village names in this particular area are incredibly difficult. Nonetheless, the Ukrainians have been able to cut off this village from further reinforcements, and at the moment, we understand that there is a small, maybe half-company-sized force of Russians that is within the small village of Zerebianki, and they have been completely cut off from Russian reinforcements coming from the direction of Vasilivka and Lobkove, which is the next village further down this highway. It does appear that the Russians did attempt a counterattack. Some of that footage we actually saw yesterday, because the counterattack had begun almost right when our news cycle was beginning as well, and so we actually got some of those initial clips showing Russian forces moving through Zerebianki and on into the area of Piatikati. And that is so freaking hard to say, but it was not successful, and the Russian forces in this area appear to have been crushed. We also got some additional footage today of a Ukrainian FPV drone being used to take out a Russian hideout within the village of Zerebianki, where that half-company-sized force still remains, and appears to be the only remaining force on the field that has not been completely destroyed by Ukrainian fire, or completely destroyed during the attempted Russian counterattack. And here's the footage right here. From what we understand at the moment, Ukrainian offensive efforts have taken a tactical pause, and so this is most likely not being followed up by Ukrainian infantry attacks. This is probably a standalone drone attack. We can see the somewhat destroyed house in the Russian dugout that is near the house, and we can now see the FPV drone coming down on top of him and taking him on out. The FPV drone is still flying in, trying to get itself lined up directly to that opening of the bunker. We can see that bunker right there, and we can see it fly right down into the trench, exploding in front of it, flinging up a little bit of the trench works, and taking that position on out. That's the end of that clip right there, but once again trying to inflict some damage onto the remaining garrison that is within that village. From what we understand at this moment, the Ukrainians will probably attempt to advance into Zerebianki, but at the same time, we're hearing some information showing that they may not be advancing into Zerebianki. From what we've heard, President Zelensky and the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense today have stated that the counteroffensive is going a little bit slower than planned. However, they did say that this is not the primary counteroffensive. The primary counteroffensive is coming later, but their probing attacks are not proving to have as fruitful results as had been planned. It appears that they are starting to run into heavier resistance, and President Zelensky did say today that most of this slower advances and heavier resistance that they're taking is because Ukrainian forces are having to move through those bottlenecks, such as minefields that have been laid out in the hundreds of thousands of square meters and even thousands of square miles in the area, that is starting to really slow Ukrainian advances. Because let's say you're moving into the area of Lobkove. The T-0812, the road itself, may not be mined, but the entire area of the field out here where the mouse cursor is, in this direction, and the entire area over here may also be mined, meaning that all Ukrainian forces advancing into this area either have to take the T-0812 or their offensive forces have to stall and wait for a mine-clearing vehicle like a Meteorite or a Miklik to come forward to then try and clear an area of the minefield, and then they move forward through another bottleneck. And while they'll be able to open up more ways for them to advance using those mine-clearing vehicles, it is still slow advances. And on top of that, if the Russians have any killing fields set up near these minefields, that also makes that fairly difficult and incredibly challenging to try and move the complete force across the field without taking losses. And so it appears that they are running into some extra difficulties, but the Ukrainians are still saying, and Zelensky is saying, that they are not deterred by these difficulties and they will continue to probe the Russian lines and prepare for the primary offensive that will be coming later. Another clip that we got from this area was a BMP-3 being destroyed in the general area. We believe that this BMP was racing forward to bring reinforcements to the area of the village of Lobkove near Zarabianki. We know that they cannot make it to Zarabianki, but moving on their way up towards Lobkove, we don't know exactly what road they were taking, they were hit by a Ukrainian FPV drone. We can see the BMP-3 right here. They also have a cope cage, it appears, set up above the turret of the BMP, and we can now see the BMP exploding. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see exactly what hit the BMP-3, but as y'all can see, it was knocked out clearly.
That guy might have gotten knocked out slightly too.
Yeah, I think he may have been knocked. I think everyone in the BMP may have been knocked out, honestly. Now the Russians are crawling. I guess this is what they call a pub crawl, but they're crawling away from the BMP-3, and we now see a drone bomblet trying to finish off the remainder of the BMP-3, although that thing already appears to have brewed up and burned on out before this bomblet was used. And we can see that the limited amount of Russian reinforcements that are moving into the area of Lobkove are already running into some pretty major attrition issues. For example, the units just not making it there. But with that, we're going to be moving on from that small part of the line, and we did see a video clip come out today from the Lobkove advance, and of course I will have to say this may be one of the few video clips that we see from the Southern Front for a while where we actually see the Ukrainians attempting to advance. Once again, they are going into a tactical pause at the moment, according to the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, and so we probably won't see a lot of offensive footage coming out for the next few days. But moving on into this clip, we did see some Ukrainian forces taking on the Russians in this area with a BMP-2. And when you hear the chat music playing as the Ukrainian BMP-2 rolls up, and I can't tell if that's the Ukrainian BMP-2. I think it actually may be. We can see the Ukrainian BMP-2 firing at a Russian position in the tree line. And we can also see that this area was heavily shelled, showing that it has been a confirmed Russian trench work for quite some while, considering that the Ukrainians have been bombarding this thing for a long amount of time. We can tell by the amount of blasts, or more so artillery impacts, that have been had near the intersection of the tree line. And we can see that BMP laying it on thick to this specific part of the Russian trench work. Sadly, we can't really assess the exact amount of damage because the footage was taken too far away, but they are laying down some very effective and accurate shots into that trench, and so we can assume there is some kind of a limited damage. With that, we're going to be moving on from that little clip in the Lobkove and Novodanlivka area, and we're going to be moving a little behind the lines towards Pavlivske and the highway leading up to that area. This is an interesting clip because this doesn't actually come from video footage of the counteroffensive as it is happening right now. This is actually a statement from our good old boy Prigozhin, aka the Nutsack. Nutsack has been stating that the Russian army sucks and they're not doing their job well. And y'all all know that is blasphemy in Russia, but I'll play this for y'all here real quick. Also with screaming Nutsack over here on the side. So here's the clip. I cannot comment in any way on how the counteroffensive is going for the AFU. I can say what is happening with us today at the contact line. Enemy is occupying Piatskansky. Enemy is occupying the northern part of Robotny. Enemy is occupying Urozhine. It says that huge pieces of land were given to the enemy. Next, in the village of Sadove, above Tokmak, the enemy is there, and pray to God it's a single group of 50 to 100 people. But there is no management, no weapons, and no ammo. Soldiers are writing letters every day that they need shells. They need anti-tank measures, grenades, and armor-piercing rounds.
бронебойные патроны. И поэтому у нас
So our
опять мир
world
разделился
split
на
into
две
two
реальности.
realities again. In one place, away from everyone, so that no one military reporter could get there.
Военкор туда не попал. Затыкается любые
All information is
информации,
blocked, and
и
the enemy is
противник
moving
идет
towards
в сторону
Молочный
Молочного лимана.
Лиман.
Если он выйдет на Молочный лиман,
If he reaches
то
Молочный
большинство
Лиман,
территорий,
then all
которые
territories
были
taken during the
захвачены
so-called
во
SMO
время
will be
так
returned by the
называемого
enemy.
СВО,
The enemy is starting to
будут
cross the
возвращены
Dnieper.
противника. Противник начинает форсировать Днепр.
In Hola Pristan, first sabotage groups are appearing, and from today, regular forces as well.
Регулярные войска. И все это
All this is hidden from everyone completely. Russia will one day wake up to find out that Crimea is now with Ukraine. There's a direct betrayal of the Russian Federation's interests.
Идет прямое предательство интересов Российской Федерации.
All this is happening against the backdrop of losses. Troops must be replenished. A soldier cannot fight alone, cannot fight when the unit is missing 50 to 60% of its personnel. He cannot withstand alone at a line where 2 or 3 should be. All of these numbers are meticulously hidden. That the leadership of the SMO doing today is hiding facts in order to give back to Moscow nice-looking reports. And it's one thing that they're used to deceive the Supreme Commander, but they're also deceiving the Russian people. If it goes on, we'll remain without the most important thing, without Russia. Yesterday, on the 20th of June, there was an assembly in the Ministry of Defense where two main issues were looked at. The Army Expo 2023, of which the main organizers are the wives and daughters of Shoigu, as well as the Maritime Parade. To run a maritime parade, you first need to get Moskva from the bottom of the Black Sea, which these scumbags have shamefully sunk together with Russian sailors. This is how the Ukrainian offensive is going as of today, and who is applauding it. The next question is, what is the cost of this special military operation? The cost is the total destruction of the army. What for? For some moron to receive the Marshal Star? For his family member to be untouchable? For him to paint himself and other conmen on the frescoes of the Ministry of Defense Cathedral? The Ukrainian counteroffensive is bringing us serious losses and problems, which are hushed up what the Russian people don't know about. When the trouble comes, I'll repeat, we may remain without an army and without Russia. And that's the end of that
Lord, that's
little...
about all Prigozhin's good for anymore, is just ranting nonstop.
Yeah, I mean...
You notice he never says anything like, you know, we're doing good, we're winning, or we have hope. It's always just negative.
It is always just negative, and he is complaining a massive deal. He's not really wrong either with the complaints, but it's crazy to hear it coming from Prigozhin, who used to be the #1 guy for Russia, the guy they pushed out there even above Kadyrov to be the one who was the face of Russia. And now this guy is just complaining about everything. He's complaining about how badly the Russian army is doing in the Southern Front. He's complaining about the situation in the war. He's even complaining about military expos that the Ministry of Defense is running in Russia. And also, he's blasting Shoigu every single chance he gets. Now, I think that would be a pretty good poll to ask, is he going to get the window treatment soon? We've asked that so many times, and so many people have said, yes, he will, and yet he still doesn't. I don't know why he hasn't gotten the window treatment yet, but with those kinds of blazing comments, just absolutely tearing apart the Russian defenses verbally in the South, it is shocking to see he hasn't ended up meeting his demise yet. But moving on out of Prigozhin's comments and on into the area of Huilopol, we also saw some Ukrainian forces firing a French Caesar SPG. This was most likely in support of the infantry ahead of them. We can see the Caesar back there. And of course they had to play some Euro techno music, so we're going to have to mute that. We can see them firing the Caesar. And with that, that's the end of the clip. Sadly, didn't get to hear the sound of the gun because that was drowned out by Euro techno music, but still, very nice to see them using a Caesar SPG on that part of the line to support the infantry further down. Meanwhile, behind the Russian lines in the direction of Novoselivka, we got some pictures of a destroyed Mista S. We are assuming that this is actually the same Mista S's that we saw being destroyed in the area, and I'll go over here real quick, and let me go find Quilopol and then Novoselivka. Some of y'all may remember a while ago, we were actually talking about some Russian SPGs that ended up being destroyed around this area right here, if I remember correctly. It's somewhere in this general area. Now, we didn't really get to see the end results of these destroyed SPGs, but we did get some pictures that were dated to the 10th of June, which would have been around the exact same time those SPGs have been destroyed, showing some completely destroyed Mista S's. Now, that doesn't look a lot like a tank, or an SPG for that matter, what remains here, but I'll show y'all what that originally looked like before it was destroyed. It looked like this. That's what a Mista S looks like. That's what it turned into after it was hit.
Dang, nothing, basically.
Yeah, nothing. There's the gun, actually, and you can see the elevation gear on the bottom, where they adjust the elevation of the gun, and the gun's completely gone. It's just sitting on the ground. So what you're looking at is the gun's breech that would have been inside of the turret, and now it's completely outside. You can also see the gun shield right there, which you can also see right there on that picture. Moving on into the next one, we can also see the tracks, the track works, or the track layout, which you can see right here, where the mouse cursor is on this Mista S, laying out in the field. The other one is right over there to the left side of the picture, over there. And we can also see some suspension and other pieces of the SPG laying out in the field as well. And moving on into our last picture, we can also see some pretty interesting stuff. This is actually the arms that hold the road wheels, which you can see right there. Those are those little pieces that hold the wheels onto the SPG, and they're just laying around all over the place because the Mista S, when it exploded, it literally tore itself apart. Very rarely do we ever see Mista S's being destroyed, but when we do, we have always noticed that the amount of ammunition that they carry, along with the paper-thin hull and also turret, leads to these things disintegrating when they get hit. Probably the most dangerous vehicle to be in as far as the Russian army goes in this war in terms of whether you'll survive the initial hit or not, considering that these things practically go nuclear. But that's a little bit of an overstatement, because really any vehicle in the Russian army is the most dangerous vehicle to be in if it's in Ukraine, because they all end up getting blown up and destroyed by the time they are a week in. But with that, we're going to be moving on from that little interesting series of pictures showing that destroyed Mista S. This is a little old. It's from the 10th of June, which is about 11 days ago. But it was still brand new, and it was still interesting to show that we finally got some pictures of what appears to be those destroyed Mista S's that were originally in the area of Novoselivka. We're going to be moving a little bit further on down the lines and towards the direction of Staromayorsk. At the moment, Ukrainian forces are still fighting in this direction. As you can see right here, Staromayorsk still falls a little bit behind the Russian lines. And if we move to there on Google Maps, no, we don't want to see that. We want to go to Google Maps, and we want to go...
Also, somebody said if you could put the deep state map in English, it'd probably be a lot easier to read.
It probably would be, but we wouldn't get all of the neat quirks and features, like Doug DeMuro says about cars, that we get with the Ukrainian version, which we might use a little bit later on tonight. So we're going to keep it that way for now, but here is Staromayorsk, and we can see the village here, and we understand that Ukrainian and Russian forces are fighting somewhere in the middle of Makarivka and Staromayorsk at this moment. Unfortunately, Ukrainian forces have not really been able to advance forward and take Staromayorsk at this point. However, the Russians are storing ammunition within the town of Staromayorsk, and the Ukrainians were able to hit a Russian ammunition depot that is within the town. Now, we can see the ammo depot right here. Let's go find where it is. So, it appears that it is most likely this building here. And let's go back and confirm. That looks a lot like it. Let's go find a second similar building, just in case it's not the right one. Actually, that appears to be the only building in the area that has the tarmac layout and also the same size. So, here's the clip of them hitting the ammo depot. Oh. But anyways, when you see the ammunition, the artillery landing nearby to the ammo depot. And we can see some Russian trench works in the area. Unfortunately, we won't really be able to locate... Wait a minute. We will be able to locate where those are, because we see a river right there. So, let's find out where that is. We know it's somewhere in this area, near the Mokry Yali River. And it's near a bend. And it appears that there's some kind of a small creek-like thing over there. And so, if we look around a little bit, it's not there. It's not here. It's a very distinct horseshoe bend that then curves out there. I would say we're probably looking at them in the area around right here, actually, because there's a little bit of a tree line there. Oh, wait, there's a couple of fields out there as well. This is making this very difficult to find. And honestly, I think we're going to have to give up on that one because there's really no distinct locations on the Mokryali River that look like that, at least according to satellite footage. And so I think we will have to end up giving up on trying to exactly find this. But this is video near the Mokryali River right here. We just don't know exactly what part of the river. And we can see the Russian positions that are lining the river being hit right here by Ukrainian artillery. Down the entire length of it, as a matter of fact. And we can also see the Russian ammunition depot inside of it has started to blow up. And we can now see them hitting...
peppered.
Man, call this paprika because they're getting salted and peppered. Oh, man. But anyways, But anyways, you can see them continuing to be hit. And we can also see Ukrainian artillery targeting a TOS-1 thermobaric launcher in that tree line over there. Sadly, we didn't get to see that one go up in flames greatly, but we still saw it. And so with that, it's great to see that the Ukrainian forces have been shelling the Russian positions in this area. And based off of the video footage, we can assume that Ukrainian forces are fighting somewhere down here. I would assume that that would be our best guess, because we also saw a Russian depot being blown up in this strip of the town over here in the village of Urozhaine. And so we can get a pretty good idea they must be in this general area. And the Ukrainians are shelling all the Russian positions that are kind of where the mouse is circling at this moment. Not entirely down to the very bottom of Staromayorsk and Urozhaine. It appears that they're targeting the Russian frontline forces that have built up garrisons, supply bases, and positions in this area in an attempt to uproot them and to start pushing them back further into the town and to also soften them up for a Ukrainian infantry tank that may come later. With that, we're going to be moving a little bit behind the lines, behind Staromanivka, where we saw that a Scooby-Doo van that was donated was destroyed by an FPV drone. Also, I like how this Scooby-Doo van literally had Zaporizhzhia Front written on the front of it.
Огромное спасибо всем жителям Иркутской области, также движению Народный фронт, которое уже не в первый раз помогает нам в обеспечении
Uh-oh, we hear some music in the background.
Sound like Frank.
Oh, that's... And we can now see the FPV drone coming in. And there's the Scooby-Doo van.
Look at it bouncing around.
Yeah, look at that goofy thing. Oh.
Oh.
Ooh.
The
Oh.
final bounce.
Yikes. Like, Zoink Scoob, I don't think warranty's gonna cover this. Raggy. No more transfer. But anyways. Oh, man. I gotta say, really nice to see. Same color Scooby-Doo van. It's very rare to see him in white, actually, like that. And I think it's just stupid. You know, I'm just saying this. Even if you're donating something to the Russians, like the Russian citizenry, to have Zaporizhzhia Front written onto the front of your van, it's like, you know, then it's just stupid. It's like, what if they don't stay in Zaporizhzhia for long and they move on to Donetsk? What in the world do they do then? Do they get rid of it, or do they just get confused and they confuse every Russian in the area that doesn't know where the hell they are and make them think they're in the Zaporizhzhia Front? I don't know.
No, they're not worried with it because they know that these soldiers aren't going to make it past that region. They will end there. Probably.
And also, Matthew, you know, if they ever drove by a Russian, it probably wouldn't confuse them that much, even if it was in, like, say, Luhansk, and they saw a Zaporizhzhia Front on it, because they'd sit there and stare at it as it drives by, and they'd turn around and go, man, if only I could read.
Yes.
But anyways.
Oh, it has to be wrong. If it's Russian, it's wrong.
It has to be wrong, blad. It has to be so wrong, blad. But still, very nice to see they were able to take out a Scooby-Doo van. We don't really know what kind of damage was caused to the occupants of Scooby-Doo van, but Scooby-Doo van did end up biting the dust today, and it's very good to see. We're now going to be moving on out of that, a little bit of news in the Staromayorsk area, and we have heard at the moment that while Ukrainian attacks are continuing in this area, they won't be lasting for much longer. Of course, that is a part of the tactical pause to frontline action for a short while. It's been described by the Ukrainians to last maybe several days, but of course we'll just have to wait and see. The Ukrainians may have other plans. Moving all the way on over into the Volodar area, though, we did get to see a unit that we haven't really heard a lot about before, the Centuria unit, and their daily life, a montage of an entire day in the Centuria unit. And I like the little scutums. If y'all are wondering, why the hell does that sound like something else? That is the Latin name for that kind of shield. It's called a scutum. I don't make the rules. It does sound like something else, but that's the name. We can see them driving on along, throwing up mud. We now see them walking down the muddy road. We now see a soldier standing there and doing a little salute. We now see another guy wearing the U.S. Navy's camo. We can now see them looking at some trash.
Must be Russians nearby.
We can now see them loading ammo belts.
Nice gun.
Nice one, bled. We can now see them looking over the top of their trench. Still a little rainy out there. We can see that the road's kind of glossed over by the rain. We now see this infantryman running forward. We can now see the infantryman making it to another Ukrainian position. We can see mosquitoes everywhere. Zzz, zzz. I can imagine the nightmare of having to deal with mosquitoes like that constantly. That would be terrible.
That would. Just terrible, I'm telling you.
Oh, man, I'm telling you, it's terrible. And we can see one Ukrainian soldier flicking off the mosquitoes. Screw you, mosquitoes, as they fly around his fingers. But anyways, we can now see them laying down some fire. We can see this guy getting the machine gun ready. He's picking it up. Can't really tell if he's firing it, though. But we can see him looking off into the distance. And it does appear that he is firing it. We can see some muzzle flash up there at the top of the screen. You see him continuing to fire it, but we really can't see the gun in frame. We now see one of them holding a grenade launcher. Can't really tell if he fired it, though. Let's see if there's music playing. There's music playing. Oh, man. Oh, man, I'm telling you. We can see them firing a rifle grenade right there. We can see them firing another rifle grenade. Because the Ukrainians do love high explosive of every kind. We now see them bringing forward another grenade. Look, it's like an egg. We now see them firing an RPG. We now see them firing a rifle. Can't really tell what kind it is, though. Maybe an AK. We now see them switching out the magazines. And we can now see them continuing on in firefights later, firing off their AK-74. And look at them go.
You know, we really never realize it because we see so many clips, but for them to be able to, like, think about filming this whole thing, plus actually fight the battle, they're, like, better multitaskers than even me.
Yeah, I mean, like, honestly, they are, because I bet you the stress is through the roof during this kind of stuff, and they're still going at it pretty well. We now see them loading...
The producer, the actor, and the director, bleed.
and there's no second takes. It's all one take.
They give you that action, bliat.
Lights, camera. Wait, no, man, the lights, camera, action. And then they go and clear a Russian trench and they get war guns, those goofy ass. But anyways, you can see them firing, getting another machine gun. When you see one guy playing the harmonica as they sit around and enjoy the sounds of the harmonica. And we see this guy over here. He was really getting into it. And we can see them riding in the back of a pickup after all that. A day in the life of the unit. And so with that, that's the end of that little video right there. Very interesting to see their daily life on film. And with that, we're now going to be moving on from that part of the Southern Front. And to once again reiterate this again, the Ukrainians are implementing a tactical pause on the counteroffensive for this moment. It has been claimed that it will only be several days long. Of course, we do not know exactly how long it is, because that would give the Russians a really good idea if the Ukrainians gave an exact timetable to when the offensive will stop, and then it will start again. So it may begin in a few days, it may begin in another day or two, or it may begin in a week or two after this tactical pause has been declared. But we probably won't be seeing a lot of action or video footage coming out of the Southern Front showing offensive actions by the Ukrainians, because there won't really be any opportunity for them, at least for the next several days at a minimum. And so we're now going to be moving on out of this area of the front line, and we're going to be moving on to America. Oh, say, can you see? Because The good news is that there has been some bipartisan support. Everyone loves to hear that word, bipartisan. There's been a little bit of support for a certain kind of weapon to be sent to Ukraine. And many of y'all have been asking about this one. And it's an ATACMS. There's been bipartisan support for an ATACMS. And so it will possibly happen that we see HIMARS using ATACMS in Ukraine in the near future. I don't know exactly when. We'll have to, hold judgment on that and wait for a little bit, but it is good to hear that there is progress being made on sending long-range missiles like the ATACMS, so that way the Ukrainians can get a little bit better at hitting those ammo depots well behind the lines, and they won't have to use the several $million Storm Shadow to do it each and every time. So very good news.
Who would have known the only thing you need to have to bring both parties together is this wonderful piece of beautiful equipment?
Who would have thought, Matthew? Really, I mean, like it's absolutely crazy, and we of course have to give a special mention that bipartisan support for anything in the U.S. government is incredibly rare. If any of y'all have been around in the political world, and I'm sure none of y'all can escape it, which is the most annoying part about politics these days, y'all will know that everyone hates each other to a very high degree, and it's very rare to get bipartisan support on anything. So it's great to see that there was some bipartisan support to get these ATACMS over there, because nothing unites America like blowing away some Russians. And so with that, we're gonna be moving on from that little bit of news here in the United States. Of course, great to see everyone in the government working together for once to just go and blow away some Russians. It's always good to know they'll unite the country together in any time of danger. And we're now going to be moving on over to Russia, because we've been hearing some interesting stuff on the streets of Moscow. A YouTube channel that was in Russia traveled around the streets and asked folks if they should invade Kyiv again, if they should give it another run, and to try and go over there and once again push through the north, through Belarus, and down into the area of Kyiv and take the city. And it actually got some mixed results from what this video showed. And so let me show you all this clip. It's incredibly interesting. All right, and here it is. Do we need to go to Kyiv a second time? What can you say? I say we should. Do we have to go to Kyiv a second time? No, we don't. I totally agree with my president. So, total agreement with what he says? Yes, for me, I do agree. What the hell?
I was about to say, that look on her face is the look you have on your face when you're tired of hearing someone talk and you're like, I've had enough of this crap.
Man, that's literally the cartoon face when something goes wrong. That's like the cartoon face of that. I actually have a lot of respect for him. He's actually a very smart man, and he's my president. That sounds really goofy to just say it like that, I just have respect. He's my president. That's like saying, do you agree with the actions of your boss cutting your daily wages? He's my boss, so I just agree. It's like, that doesn't really sound like a logical point to come from. So that's the secret. I respect him. He's a man of his word, a man of action. He's noble, conscientious, and I don't see anyone like him now. Yeah, because blowing journalists away with 2 bullets in the back of the head and dropping them off in a kindergarten playground is very conscientious and noble of someone. If he says that we have to go to Kyiv for the second time, do we go? I will not discuss this question. This is politics. It does not concern us. What the hell? Don't use my line. Don't use my line, dagnabbit. I do not know whether to attack or not. If ever, golly. What the hell? Where in the world do you get all of those words out? I do not know whether to attack or not. If even Putin does not know, how should I know? He, as president, questioned and appealed to Russian citizens. He wanted to ask them this question. What can you as a citizen say? Let the commander-in-chief decide. While you sip on that Pepsi from KFC, I see you there. And that's a little interesting, man. It looks like KFC is still running some business out of Russia. I guess it's too finger-licking good for them to ignore the business from the Russians.
Oh, the colonel was actually Vladimir Chicken.
That's a very interesting comment, Matthew. I don't even really know where to go with that one, to be quite honest with you. I gotta say this, though. Weren't the sanctions supposed to ensure that companies like KFC weren't able to do business with the Russian Federation? How come this guy is able to enjoy KFC at this point of the war?
Oh, man, there's still a ton of companies avoiding sanctions right now. Plenty of them. KFC's just one of them.
Well, I think we might need to go and get some finger-licking action done against companies that are still doing business with Russia, because it's pretty weird to see that they're over there still.
Вы бы им не посоветовали туда на Киев?
No, of course not. Why?
Мужу или сыну?
Да нет, конечно, зачем?
I think it should be up to the Ministry of Defense to decide whether to attack or not. But I don't understand why he's asking
Я
himself.
против войны.
I'm generally
Поэтому
against the
моя
war, so
позиция
my position is that we must lay down our
надо
arms.
складывать оружие. И я против.
Сами все сдадут.
They will surrender Kyiv on their own. Yes?
Ну, конечно, что делать?
Каким
Of
образом?
course. What else can they do?
Просто тут всё,
How?
проиграли,
They'll
всё,
realize they've
потеряли,
lost,
всё
and then there will be no
Вам не страшно,
negotiations.
если мобилизацию
Aren't you
объявят?
afraid if
Всеобщую.
general mobilization is announced?
страшно.
Yes, but what else is there to do?
Идти нам на Киев или нет?
Attack Kyiv or not? No, my opinion is no.
Не надо.
Честно говоря, я бы также воздержалась.
Well, they did them a solid, blurring their faces out.
Yeah, man. That's it. You can always tell who's going to answer what based off of whether they're blurred or not in this video before they even get to the answer. It's like, oh, they said they shouldn't. But anyways, rewinding this one so that way we can start off. Let's see. Frankly speaking, I would refrain from answering because I don't particularly like to talk about politics. Moreover, in the end, everyone stays with his opinion, and my position may be used against me in some way, so I'm not ready to answer these questions.
Нужно ли нам идти на Киев?
Do we need to go to
второй раз или не
Kyiv for a
нужно? Вы
second
как
time?
считаете?
What do you think? Of course we need to, don't you think? Because it's the only solution.
Посмотрим.
Well, we'll see. I don't know
Даст
yet.
команду пойдете?
If he gets the command, will you go? No, I don't know. I don't think so.
Почему нет желания?
Why don't you want to go?
Уже пора.
Is it time already? And so with that, that's the end of the clip. And really interesting results from Russia. It appears that there's some mixed ideas as to whether they should or should not invade Kyiv again. And I'd have to say, very interesting to see that there's even some public statements of things like, nah, we should not go back over there again and try and invade Kyiv. It appears that a lot of people may be losing support on the war, but then again, it's really hard to tell in Russia because getting an accurate poll or an accurate sample of the population, it's really tough to do. But with that, we're going to be moving on out of Russia because that's the only news we had from there today. And we're now going to be moving on into our location unknowns. But there's been many of y'all here in the live chat that have been speaking about very interesting things. I've seen a lot of comments from top to bottom, left to right, and north to south about some of the leading questions of the day, like what's going on in the counteroffensive? What do y'all think about the counteroffensive possibly slowing? What do y'all think about the Russians running out of supplies? What do you think about what Prigozhin's been saying? A lot of questions have been asked, and there's a lot of questions to still ask even further on tonight, and I want to hear what y'all have been saying about them. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so moving into our first poll question, it says many global firms pledge to help Ukraine rebuild post-war, and is Ukraine's culture at risk? It looks like 62% said no, Ukraine will keep their culture. 16% said yes, it might be washed out by it. 15% said it might hurt it slightly, and 7% said unsure. And on this one, I have to say, with so much support, it's a really great thing that a lot of people are willing to put their money towards Ukraine to help them rebuild because it will certainly need the help. However, one thing with Western companies liking to help, typically it standardizes pretty much everything. McDonald's and all these Western companies show up in the country, and then they end up basically washing out and drowning out the culture. I hope that doesn't happen, and hopefully Ukraine will take steps to ensure it doesn't. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would actually have to go against the majority here. Very interesting here. Y'all don't think it would wash out the culture of Ukraine. But in my honest opinion, I would rather see Ukraine protect its culture, because one thing I know is that when American companies arrive, they do start to eventually try and choke out whatever there is there. And that happens with really any business. You can see Chinese businesses doing that wherever they're allowed to operate outside of China. They also start trying to crush the competition and kill them. And that is something that is always a bit of a threat. For example, when we went to the United Kingdom, just to talk from experience, in places like London, you'd find stuff like Five Guys pretty normally, and that just seemed really weird, especially coming from America, where Five Guys is a common thing, and then going to the United Kingdom, where Five Guys in most of the major cities is also a common thing. And it made it feel like, Britain wasn't really that British. It felt Americanized in the places like that, like in London. In some places, it just felt like it was America, like an older American city like Boston or something similar. And I would say that it's good to know that many companies are coming in, and I would highly encourage them, especially to go to Ukraine, because it'll be great for business and it'll be great for everyone involved. The United States will make a good amount of money. Ukraine will make a great amount of money. Their economy will probably start to explode. But at the same time, I always think it's very important for countries like Ukraine, when being presented with this new kind of business, to balance out the income or the expected profits off of these new businesses coming in with cultural protection laws to make sure that Ukrainian culture is preserved, maybe give mom and pop shops an upper hand advantage against larger companies that may come in, so that way mom and pop shops don't end up being destroyed, because a lot of a culture exists through the people living in that country being able to run their own businesses, and their culture is brought forward in their businesses and how they interact and operate with their customers, among many other things. And when an American company comes in, and many of y'all, especially a lot of Americans, will know this, whenever a Walmart comes into a local area, if you have any mom and pop shops, you can guarantee they'll all be dead within a few years. Walmart will ensure that their prices are predatory to kill them off, and then after all those mom and pop shops are killed off, they then raise their prices, killing off the local culture and also killing off the local businesses. And I think that it would be important for Ukraine to make sure that they are able to balance these new businesses coming in, but also balance the ability for Ukraine to stay, special, to keep it unique, and to make sure that their culture is preserved. I feel like it would be bad to say no American businesses, no foreign support or foreign investment, because that's not good, and that wouldn't be good for the Ukrainians economically in the long term. But it also isn't good to say yes, let them all in with no restrictions whatsoever, and if the Ukrainian culture ends up collapsing and dying just due to a massive influx of American companies, then so be it. Because that's how you end up losing the diversity and culture around the world that makes the world such a special and a unique place. Hopefully, the Ukrainians will be able to possibly use this economic upturn, much like the South Koreans have, where they are able to start exporting their culture worldwide, kind of like Japan and South Korea has. I think they're some of the best examples at this point, because nobody until recently had ever really watched, and when I say recently, I'm meaning about the past 2 decades, nobody had really watched anything television-wise or movie-wise from South Korea or Japan until about 20 years ago, and due to their great economic progress, people started to get exposed to their culture because their own businesses, thanks to economic investment from American companies and Western businesses, was able to grow enough that they were able to make their own successful companies based off the income that was moving through their country, and then they were able to spread out around the world and start to share their culture with everyone else. I think that's really neat, and I think as far as Ukraine goes, they should try and model their cultural preservation similar to the Japanese and the South Koreans, where there is American and Western investment, but at the same time, their culture remains firm, and they are also able to spread it around the world and show people what their country is, at least in a smaller form. And so with that, I hope that addresses that, in my opinion. I wonder if y'all find that interesting. If y'all do, discuss that in the live chat, and I'll be trying to see what y'all are saying about that and what y'all think about those ideas. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next poll says, are the global firms promising to help rebuild Ukraine prioritizing profits or humanitarianism? It looks like 49% said they're prioritizing profits, 22% said prioritizing humanitarianism, and 29% said unsure. And I know the opinions are going to vary wildly on this one, and the poll reflects that. For me personally, I think investment firms are basically solely involved in trying to gain the most profit. That's the point of the firm, and they may appear outwardly like they're trying to worry themselves with humanitarian issues, but in reality, they're trying to get the biggest return on investment. There's nothing wrong with that, but I hope that Ukraine does act cautiously when dealing with these folks, and know that they might not always have their best interest in mind, and to always take a second look at all the proposals. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that private investment firms are always in it to make money. And, really, honestly, I have to tell you all this because this is something a lot of people are getting lost in the weeds in here in America. A business is not there to try and make a stand or to be a part of a movement. It is there to make money. If they ever are a part of a stand or a movement, the attempt in being a part of that stand or movement is to try and encourage people to buy their products and end up getting more business and therefore making more profits. Investment firms are very similar. And while they are there in Ukraine, it isn't really for the humanitarian purpose or because they really like Ukraine. It's just because they see a new economy or a new market rising out of Ukraine at the moment due to the massive investment of military arms and economic support that is already there. And they're seeing this is going to be something that we could invest in and get paid off on heavily. Kind of like Korea. Not to go back to South Korea, but Korea, I would say, is one of the most similar examples to what we're seeing in Ukraine right now. Back in the 80s, up until that point, South Korea had been behind North Korea in every way, industrially, economically. There was nothing in South Korea that was good. It was a dictatorship as well, and so nothing was really working all too well. But once there was almost a civil war in South Korea, it almost turned into one due to student riots in the mid-'80s. They finally got a democratically elected leadership in a way, and also they were able to finally get the Olympics to come to their country. And once all of that started happening and money was kind of going to be moving that way anyway, it's just a small amount of it. It wasn't a massive amount. The Olympics isn't like a multi-trillion-dollar thing. It's only, I think a few $billions that you can actually profit off of that. But it was enough that a lot of investment companies then arrived in South Korea and started to try and build all kinds of stuff. They started to try and build malls. They started to try and build different kinds of factories and manufactories. And that's also where you would start to see some of the South Korean companies like Samsung, which at that moment I think was a shipbuilding company. You would see them to really start to take off, along with the foreign investment companies that also started to pop up there as well. And that's kind of what we'll see in Ukraine. It has nothing to do with emotional attachment to the country. It more so has to do with their ability to make a buck. But in the end, they'll end up benefiting Ukraine because if the investment companies are making $1, Ukraine's also making $1 as well. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our third poll says the UN says the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is using 3+ water sources right now, and the situation will remain stable for months. And what are your thoughts? It looks like 50% said great, it sounds like it's under control. 27% said, I'm kind of skeptical of that. 16% said unsure, and 7% said it's not under control and it's false news. And I have to say, I saw a lot of people earlier saying that they don't trust the UN. I don't particularly trust them either. But on this one, I'll say I'm skeptical. I won't say it's false. But of course, it's very precarious. Even if they do have 3+ water sources, it's not receiving water from its normal source. So they're having to basically jury rig some ways here to get the water into the plant, which is not good and it's very risky. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I would say it's a very cautious situation, and they're trying to make this sound good by going, it won't be a bad situation for a few months. It's like, well, what happens when a few months is over? Are we in a very bad situation at that point? What will happen? It's like, honestly, that doesn't sound good to me. That sounds like a positive, that sounds like a terrible statement made in a positive way. There's nothing positive about saying, the reactors will melt down in a few months, but for now it's under control. It's like, that doesn't sound good at all.
How do they know that the 3 water sources are going to stay stable? Because they weren't designed to basically cool the entire plant. So they're having to make these ways work, and it's really not intended for that.
Yeah, I don't really think that's a good statement. That just sounds like a bad statement put in a good light. But we'll just have to wait and see, of course, with that power plant as to how things go, because the messages revolving around that power plant are mixed. The power plant operators aren't happy with the situation. The IAEA is trying to play it down and say it's not that bad of a situation. But before that, the IAEA was saying that if the Novikakhovka dam was blown up and the reservoir was emptied, the reactors would be in a terrible state. And they had been saying that for months up until the dam was actually blown up, and then they changed their statements to say, it's not that bad. So I don't really know what's going on there at the moment. There's a million mixed messages coming out about it, of course, from experts on every end. So I'm going to hold judgment on it, but it doesn't sound like that good of a comment. It sounds like a very negative comment trying to be spun in a good light. But with that, I hope that does address that very well. And really quickly, to go back to something, a little bit of a rabbit hole, I actually saw Guitar Jams, a channel legend who's been around forever. He said the Olympics isn't really that profitable for some countries. Most countries. They end up losing money. That's actually something relatively new, and that's why the Olympics is kind of on its way out and dying, is because the Olympic Committee, which is the organization or the entity that's responsible for managing and running the Olympics, is charging more and more fees and also requiring a lot more out of the countries or the cities that are hosting the Olympics, to the point that it's no longer profitable. The first Olympics in history, I believe, that was not profitable in the modern age was the 2012 London Olympics. Since then, no Olympics has ever been profitable. The London Olympics actually broke even. It was a flat even. But every other Olympics after that has ended up losing massive amounts of money. Before that, though, the Olympics was a money-making opportunity, and that's why cities and nations around the world would kill to have the Olympics hosted wherever they could inside of their own country. That's why you would see cities like Atlanta, Georgia, having the Olympics run out of Atlanta in the 90s, because it was a money-making opportunity, and it had been forever. But now that the Olympic Committee is changing a lot of how they run the Olympics, the Olympics, and I'm so sorry for stuttering like that. I said the Olympics is not as profitable as it used to be. In fact, it's actually a money pit now where people end up losing money on it. And that's also why you see that there's not as much competition to host the Olympics as there was a few decades ago. But back in the day, to get back to why that was a point, back in the day when South Korea hosted the Olympics in the 80s in Seoul, it was a massive money-making opportunity, and that's why it was a huge economic boost for South Korea to host the Olympics, because it was a massive money-making opportunity as it was. And then the investment firms came along with it because they saw an opportunity to make long-term dollars off of the short boost of income that South Korea was going to get from those Olympics. But anyways, getting out of that rabbit hole, because it's a really interesting one, and if y'all are wondering why in the world the Olympics are no longer profitable, just go and pull it up. There are literal essays and books being written about it, because it's a massive deal within the Olympics community, and nobody's really happy with how the Olympics committee is practically sucking everyone dry now if they want to host the Olympics. But anyways, with that, hope that addressed that the best I could, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that being said, we are all out of polls. So we're moving on to our Super Chat questions. And up first, we have a Super Chat from Duncan VR, who puts in a very generous $55 donation. And thank you, Duncan, very much for that support. And also, of course, you put me through the animal noises once again. He says, Bamuba, Mr. Piggy Prigozhin. Baba does talk a lot of baba. He sounds like a pig, oink. And he speaks like a sheep, baba. Oh, man, I'm telling you. Prigozhin says, ba 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 ba, oink oink, throw him out a window. Get some pizza, guys. Matt loves the animal sounds. I gotta say, it keeps me on my toes.
They've grown on Matthew. I will say that they have actually grown on Matthew behind the scenes. He doesn't dislike them as much as he used to. Back in the day, though, when we originally started doing this, he was like, "Oh my God, he's doing it again." The animal noises, and now
it took me a while to warm up to these noises. I gotta say.
Yeah, and now Matthew actually likes them. But back in the day, he actually was like, "Oh God," and he would be like, "Oh no, please help me." But anyways, I gotta thank you so much once again for the support, Duncan, and helping this channel to keep on running. Of course, throwing in the animal noises. And I'm going to thank you for coming back. You were missing for a good while, I believe, here on this channel. And it's good to have you back. And I got to thank you so much once again for supporting this channel and helping us to keep it running. Oh, man, I'm telling you, you know, respect around here. And also, we will make sure to get some pizza. We can't recommend enough Capella's in Birmingham. If y'all are ever here, you've got to go to Capella's Pizza. It's the best pizza. It's the best pizza in the city, Jerry. It's the best, Jerry. But still, thank you so much once again for support, Duncan, and helping this channel to keep on running. And Matthew, in fact, does love the animal noises now. He finally came around to loving them. And so with that, and so with that, thank you so much once again for support. Hope we addressed that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
I like the contrast. We go from talking about, oh, this nuclear power plant might blow up tomorrow and, you know, devastate Europe to ba-ba-ba-moo-ba. It's a hell of a shift. But anyways, moving to our next super chat, we have another very generous donation from Jesus UCSB, who puts in a $50 donation. And thank you, Jesus, very much for that support. He says, Hola, I have an idea. If any of the Russians that watch The Enforcer, please send a message to Matt. I'm willing to box Prigozhin. If and when I beat him, I'd take control of the Wagner Group and use him to fight Russia. And he says, Jesus UCSB is ready. LSA.
Man, he talked in the third person like that guy on Seinfeld, man. You know, like, get your hands off Larry. Larry doesn't like it. And like, he is Larry. Yeah, Jimmy. I'm sorry, I forgot. I thought it was Larry. You know, I guess you could say he's living like Larry. But anyways, I gotta thank you for the support, Jesus UCSB, and helping this channel to keep on running. And if there are any Russians, send a message to Matthew so that we can arrange this boxing match with Prigozhin. Jesus UCSB, they call him the janitor in the boxing ring because he's going to mop the floor with anyone he goes up against. And I gotta thank you so much once again for all the Russians reaching out to us so that way we can arrange this boxing Max. What the hell is Max? The boxing match with Prigozhin, and I know Jesus UCSB would win that one hands down. Prigozhin would come into the ring going, Shoigu! And Jesus would say, this is the janitor, baby. Boom, and knock him out. It's like, man, he would slaughter. But still, thank you so much once again for the support, Jesus, and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And we will try and arrange that for our Lee Spring Army tanker, the commander of the Lee Spring Army tank force. And I gotta thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running and being a dedicated Lee Spring Army soldier. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the final question of this segment, and then we'll be moving right back into our location unknowns and the rest of our frontline news.
All right, and the last one goes to Cindy Mitchell, who puts in a very generous $45 donation. And thank you, Cindy, very much for the support. And she said from Tucker and Nana, and send it to the chat. And also, by the way, I saw Cindy say that she got the shirts that she ordered from the merch store, and Tucker and her was very happy with them. And I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad Tucker likes it. And Enforcer, what say you?
And also, it's cool to hear that y'all got the shirts. But like one thing we're always concerned about, considering it's a third-party merch store, is that the deliveries won't be quick. And it's good. We've been so happy to hear that people are getting all of their merch on time. Because whenever we hear that stuff, we actually end up going to the third party that runs the merch store, and we're like, "What the hell are y'all doing? Hurry up!" Like we go over there, like we're taking care of business. But still, I got to thank you so much once again, Cindy, for getting yourself and Tucker some merch. And also, I got to thank you so much once again for supporting this channel and helping us to keep this thing running, because folks like you make this possible. And so, thank you so much once again for the kind words. Thank you for getting some $1 million merch shirts. And I hope you all enjoy them and get a long wearing out of them, because they are incredibly cool looking shirts with an incredibly cool looking design from none other than Elizabeth from California. And Matthew, did she want a live chat?
She did.
And let's get that thing.
All right, and the live chat question is going to go to Thomas LSA. And also, by the way, I'm having a live chat question shortage tonight. So if you have one, put @Enforcer Matt in the chat with your question behind it, and I'll add it to the spreadsheet. But Thomas's question is, didn't KFC and McDonald's pull out of Russia?
KFC, well, McDonald's did pull out of Russia, and then they got replaced by Tasty Period, which is a Russian run business that was created by the Russian government. KFC, let's pull it up. Does KFC still do business in Russia? We can no longer open KFC restaurants, unfortunately, but we are obliged to support them, he said. Wait, hang on. Let's read this Reuters article. April 25th, Reuters. Some former KFC restaurants in Russia began reopening as rustics on Tuesday as new owners revive a brand born soon after the collapse of the Soviet Union, although franchise agreements mean the U.S. chain's brand is set to live on. And then it goes to that stupid, local TV, look at a house. It all started in this house. But anyways, moving on from that. Kotov, flanked by Rostov's red, white, and black logo at a press conference in Moscow to mark the opening, said his firm would support franchisees that choose to stay as KFC and would not force them to switch. Originally launched in 1993, while Russia was transitioning from communism to capitalism, Rustics became KFC's vehicle for expansion in Russia, where it had more than 1,000 restaurants before Yum. What the hell's Yum?
That's the company that runs KFC.
Oh, really?
Yes, their parent company.
That is a stupid name for a parent company, honestly. That's like Tasty, period. That's like, what the hell are you thinking? Anyways, brands announced plans to exit last year after Russia dispatched troops to Ukraine. KFC partnered with Rustics in 2005 before later buying it out. The new owner said the possibility of Yum Brands one day returning to Russia had not been ruled out. Yum Brands did not immediately respond to a request for comment. And we can now see a picture here.
Is Yum Brands, is that Chinese? By the way, I saw somebody say that earlier.
Let's see. Yum Brands. Let's see. Is an American fast food corporation listed on the Fortune 1000.
Aha.
Yum operates the brands KFC, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, and the Habit Burger Grill, except in China, where the brands are operated by a separate company, Yum China.
Damn, it's basically Unhealthy Incorporated, basically.
Yeah, it's just literally Cholesterol Inc. That's what it is. Good God, dude, I didn't know they run Taco Bell, man. I didn't know that, and I kind of like
either.
Taco Bell. That's interesting. I did not know that. Anyways, So it appears that they're reviving Rostock, but Yum is not the one doing it. So this is once again like Tasty Period, where the Russian government has stepped in and they are the ones who are reviving a brand, so that way it still stays around. That's what it appears to be when we're reading that. And so with that, I hope that answers that fairly well. And I got to thank you so much once again, Cindy Mitchell, for supporting this channel and helping us to keep this thing running. Because folks like you make it possible. Luckily, I can still continue to eat that absolute garbage, which is called Taco Bell, which I love that garbage. It's the best garbage. Because Yum is not the one that is actually opening up the businesses over there in Russia. It's actually the Russian government that's doing it, and Yum has nothing to do with it. So, with that, hope that does address that fairly well, and thank you so much once again, Sydney, for the support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. Folks like you make it possible. I've got to thank you so much once again for being an old guard of the Lee Spring Army, and of course supporting this channel and helping it to keep on rolling. With that, we're now going to be moving on into our Location Unknown news, starting off with our first clip where we saw that a cook was cooking with a mine. Here's the mine. It's a mine. He's cooking out of a landmine. You can see him greasing up the landmine and getting ready to cook. Wait, let him cook. Actually, he's cleaning out the landmine. They've already cooked in it. And we can see he's
getting a kick out of cleaning that mine.
Man, he is certainly minding his own business, though, aren't they?
Minding it.
Minding his own business. Oh, he is. But I gotta say, great respect to that. Great respect to that. New cooking utensils, can't complain. Anyways, here's an Mi-17 in action, firing off on guided rockets. And also some pretty cool music. And we can see some pretty cool visors. Look at that. They're like sharks. That's not a shark, by the way. We can see the Mi-17 flying over the forests. We can see them looking out of the rearview mirror, just in case if there's any oncoming traffic or they have to merge. And we can now see them firing off their rockets, and now popping off their flares as they get on out of there. Actually, we didn't see... Well, there we go. There's the flares. And we can now see them hitting the deck, and that's the end of the clip. But really cool to see that they were firing off some more rockets at Russian forces in the distance. Well, now we're going to be moving on to our next clip, where we also saw some Ukrainian forces training on the Carl Gustav. On the side of a road. Would you look at that? They're now reloading. We now see them reload the Carl Gustav. We can see the fella getting ready to fire it again. He fired it again, and it's on its way. We can now see them reloading the Carl Gustav again. This will be its third shot of the video.
Машина!
And is it just me, or is it when the Carl Gustav fires, and you hear that little ringing afterwards, it sounds like the exact kind of ringing that would have been used in a Looney Tunes cartoon when someone got hit on the head with a frying pan. It sounds like the exact same kind of ringing. Varmint on a blow to smithereens! They gotta wait for some car to pass. Didn't really get to hear it right there because the wind's picking up. But still, really neat to see that the Carl Gustav is being fired, and cool to see that they're training with it. Of course, amazing, absolutely incredible. And with that, we're going to be moving on to our next clip where we saw a Ukrainian T-72. They said it had unusual paint job and markings. I don't really see that much unusual with it, rather than the German cross right there. And that's like,
a little unusual.
Well, you know, that is, I have to say this, in all defense, it looks like a cross that the German here would use in the modern day. It doesn't look like the ones that they use. That's called a Balkan ruse in the Second World War. I think whoever posted this was trying to get that reference, you know, that Geschnick Verleichman, you know, kind of reference, but I'm not really seeing it. Still a cool camo, though. See them looking at the tank. I like the camo. I also like that giant red fire extinguisher they have on the side of the tank. Pretty cool all around. And when we asked the Germans for comment, all we got was "Geschnick by lightning," and so we said, "Okay, fair enough." Anyways, we're going to be moving on from that interesting little clip right there. Pretty cool to see. And we're going to be moving on to our next one, where we saw a Ford Technical. Have you ever wanted to have the ultimate in manpower? Well, then you need to get yourself an all-new Ford F-150 with the BTR's 30mm autocannon mounted onto the back. This little fella is going to get to work. When I say get to work, I'm not talking about a 9 to 5. I'm talking about 9 to 5 Russians laying in a grave. We now see them lining up the 30mm gun. We can also hear a hydraulic noise that many people pointed out was these little support legs extending. We can now see
comical.
We can now see the back of the Ford F-150 is now supported properly, and they're now firing the autocannon. This appears to be at a training range. I gotta tell you, for some reason, Ukraine is really starting to love these Fords. Like, we're starting to see more and more of them doing random stuff.
You know why?
Because they're built Ford tough.
Right.
And then when, then right at the end of the video where it cuts off, this guy accidentally pulls the trigger and it just goes pop, 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 as they're turning left. But anyways, that's the end of the clip. We're going to be moving on from that one and on to our next one, where we saw a low-flying Ukrainian Su-25. It was really neat. So here's the clip. And also, meh. But anyways, I'll mute that because sadly I can't play that. But when you see the Su-25 flying over the fields right there, look at that thing go. And look at the other one go. They are absolutely flooring it. Absolutely slamming it.
Is that a frogfoot?
Those are Su-25 frogfoots. I gotta tell you, I don't know who came up with that name. Someone in the NATO, the NATO headquarters, when they were coming up with these identification names, was sitting there, what should we call this thing? You know, all of the other things were called flanker, flogger. There's another one that we can't say. You know, there's that one, but we can't really say that one. And then someone just snorts a line of coke. And it says, so he goes, I call that one a frogfoot, and they just went with it. It's like, what the hell? Who in the world came up with that? Anyways, moving on.
I have a frogfoot, thanks to Trister1.
And I do want to thank Trister1 for sending those incredibly cool models. Matthew ended up being an absolute model hog, and he stole the Su-25. I only have the F-16 D, well, the F-16C actually from Poland. But we both were like ogling over that Su-25, and then Matthew ended up taking it like the British Museum. But with that, we're going to be moving on from that little clip and on into our last one, where we saw the Russian casualty report for the day, and it was somewhat high.
Oh my goodness, 8 Bobcats?
8 Bobcats, blitz. One of the highest numbers. And also, Jesus USB Putin shaking Bobcat is having a cholesterol attack, and it's an illicit for life. I must thank Jesus for his support to the Lee Spring Army as we continue on our mission in supporting Ukraine, blitz. And moving on from that, we can see Moscovia, Dylan the East. I believe that's most likely. I believe that's Latin. He said, "E Bobcats for the man, blitz," and we can see this Bobcat doing a head spin. Look at this. Absolutely.
And then it flips over.
And then we can see
almost.
It almost flipped over, blitz. And that's all the memes. We only had 2 Bobcat memes for 8 Bobcats, blitz. And 8
That's a blessing.
An absolute blessing. 8 Bobcat skid steers destroyed. 8 special equipment vehicles destroyed. One of the highest numbers we've seen this month. We also saw that 540 Russian troops ended up biting the dust, rounding the number up to exactly 222,000 Russian soldiers taken out. Also, we saw that they were accompanied by many vehicles and really everything you could imagine. 21 armored personnel carriers, well above average. 22 supply trucks, well above average. 9 tanks, well above average. 32 artillery pieces, well above average. 35 drones, well above average. 1 MLRS, that's actually a little above average. 3 anti-aircraft warfare systems, considerably above average. Amazing numbers today. Not incredibly high in the troop casualties. more so the troop fatalities, but incredibly high in every other category. And these are the categories that help these infantry to survive. So this number may continue to go up tomorrow, considering that they may be lacking any armor support at this moment on the battlefield. With that, we're going to be moving on from the casualty report and on into the news in the Northeast, because while we haven't seen any frontline changes, the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense did report that today Ukrainian forces were conducting a micro counteroffensive to the south and west of Kremmina, somewhere around the area in between Dubrova and Torske, and also near the Seversky Donets River. We didn't have any video evidence to confirm these actions, but we did see one clip of a Ukrainian drone taking out a Russian tower during this counteroffensive, which is our only video evidence of the offensive being underway. We're going to have to mute that here. When you see the drone flying on in, and we can see the tower right there. We can see the drone flying on in, and we can see the tower right there. And we can see the drone flying on in. And we can see it hit, and we can see the tower right there. And we can now see it being hit. I feel like this is just me repeating the same lines about 4 times now. But that tower was taken out. Very nice to see, and hopefully helping the Ukrainians to push forward without the Russians having an okay idea of what they're doing. We now see the smoke dissipating, and it appears that tower took some damage. And Lay Anna just said in the live chat, who doesn't know a lot about Coke? Well, I don't really know a lot about the kind of Coke that you sniff, but I do know that we did get some Mexican Coca-Colas today, and they are so good. They use cane sugar instead of corn syrup, and you can really taste the difference. Like, it is actually a noticeable difference in flavor.
And also, they put it in glass bottles. Why can't we have that for regular Coke?
I know, it's like, it's so Gucci looking and so Gucci feeling. Yeah, we just get the plastic bottles. I don't know what's up with that. Anyways, we're going to be moving on from the little offensive happening near Kremmina and on down into the area of Bachmut, specifically Sperne, where we saw some Russian forces getting shelled near the village. It's claimed that they're moving east of Sperne in this clip, and considering that we got a little bit of a location there, let's go to Sperne, and let's see where in the world this would be. So, here's Sperne, right there, and they said they were moving to the east, so they're somewhere over here. Now let's try and find out where this video was made. It was made on a dirt road, and there are some buildings there that have been destroyed, but it's too small, it's too big of an area actually to be Sperne. It may be Mykolaiv, or it may be a town that we can't really see on the map, because I can't find anything nearby that would look like that. Anyways, getting back to the clip, we can now see the Russians being shelled, and we can now see them blow up. We see them panicking, freaking out, and doing everything else in between. Oh man, I'm telling you, they get no respect around here. And we can now see the remainder of the column moving forward. That tank just pooted. I don't know if any of y'all saw that. That tank just pooted right here. Watch this, man. Up here just lets out a little Vladimir Putin right there.
It's Putin.
I'm not committing war crimes in Ukraine, blood. But anyways, that's the end of the clip, and nice to see they were able to shell some of the Russian vehicles in that area and inflict some losses. Moving on to a clip in a similar area, we also saw some Russian ammo cooking up. We're gonna have to mute that. But when you see
that line kind of came like right after like everyone talking about Coke, and then you said cooking up.
Wait, let him cook. But we can see
no, don't let him do that.
Don't let them do that. Someone needs to get the DEA on this guy. And congratulations, by the way. Speaking of which, we have to say this retroactively. Congratulations to drugs for winning this war on drugs, but anyways, we can see the ammo depot blowing up. We can see a rocket firing through the tree line. And we can see them firing out of the ammo depot as well. We can see the ammo still burning. Oh, man, little explosions. That's what really counts. It's not the CS that counts, believe. It's just a little. Oh. I would be scared to be around this ammo fire, man. This is a work hazard right here.
It is.
You would think OSHA would come in and say something about the work safety here. But look at this, man. It's just going off. That's the end of the clip. There's a rail yard here. We could probably try and find where that is, but I don't want to bother y'all with having to try and find that because it could be anywhere. But with that, we're going to be moving on from that little clip in the northern area of Bakhmut, and we're now going to be moving on into the area near Minkivka, where we saw a bastion firing at the Russians. Actually, we saw two. Oh, novosti!
Oh, yes.
And we can see the bastions firing. Oh, yeah, give it to them, baby! And we can see them firing off their rockets. Very nice.
They're awfully fast.
They are very fast, actually. Hopefully they're accurate. And we see one of them still firing off. Man, he firing off! But with that, that's the end of that clip. Nice to see them using some bastions to lay down some fire onto the Russians. Meanwhile, the frontline forces that they're supporting, the 225th Battalion, were able to make some progress today and captured a few Russian soldiers here in the northern flank of Bachmut.
Да, подходи сюда. Иди сюда. Иди сюда. Сюда иди, подходи.
Well, you see them encouraging Russian soldiers to surrender.
Быстро, сука. Сюда, вниз, ко мне на меня иди. Сева, силуэт. Сюда иди, быстро. Ты сам?
We hear him still encouraging this Russian to put his hands up in the air.
Пидор, ты один? Сюда иди ко мне. Быстро, шляпа, бегом. Быстро, блядь. Где оружие, сука, пидорас? Давай, иди сюда. Ко мне. Ну ты гуманитарка.
We now see him talking with the squad.
Иди сюда, ко мне.
And we now see the Russian coming up with his hands up.
Где еще кто-то? Сел, на землю садись, на землю.
This guy gave up pretty easy. He didn't even fire a shot. There was not a firefight to get this guy to surrender.
На меня смотри. Куда они не дошли? Сева, контроль. Метр 50 отсюда. Сколько? То есть они там по прямой за спиной у нас, да? Да. У меня за спиной.
You see them interrogating the Russian to figure out if there's any other guys in the position.
Правильно.
And we can see him taking a moment because, of course, the knife is kind of heavy. He had to rest it, so he's just putting it on his shoulder for a minute.
Там половина побилов. Сколько человек, сука? Около 40. Смотри, мы сейчас тебе повесим на спину устройство. Если ты это дернешься, мы нажмем кнопку, оно взорвется, понял?
You now hear him talking one-on-one with him.
Будешь делать то, что мы тебе скажем. Мы тебя заберем, потом обменяем, домой поедешь. Ты понял? Понял. Поворачивайся ко мне спиной. Спиной поворачивайся, туда смотри.
They're continuing to ask him questions. You can see the camera getting a very close-up look at this fabric, and we can even see that so close we can see the little holes in the knitting.
Very breathable fabric.
Very breathable. This is what they call dry fit.
Поставь действие. Километр. Снимаю. Сейчас это... смотри, километр поставил. Поставил. Все, 700 метров. Все, у тебя кнопка? Все, есть. Смотри. Мы тебе
Now see them
покажем,
continuing to interrogate the Russian.
Нормально. Вернешься ко мне, я сниму детонатор, понял? Ты же видишь,
You
что
see
мы...
some Ukrainians moving around in the trees over there in the back.
Вставай. Вставай, все, не бойся. Вставай, просто на спину не облокачивайся, все взорвется. Вставай. Можно закурить, пожалуйста? Можно, да. Бери. Да кури, давай. Ну, все можно, оно там крепко зафиксировано. Что ты, очкуешь или что? Не очкуй, закуривай. Жить будешь, мы так 100 раз делали. Серега, жизнь у тебя может быть длинная и счастливая, а может быть яркая и быстрая, понял? Давай лучше потихоньку.
We now see the soldier toking on a SIG. He is now on the wall.
Контроль. Кубик. Идем.
Wow, is he really about to give up his own guys?
I think he is.
Да, ну не то, что вон сломано, видишь, прямо. Какой-то вот 5 метров, да? Да нет, сука, это большое. Вот прямо, вот там труп лежит. Видишь?
Also, really quickly to clarify something, I like to thank Paula McDonald in the live chat for doing this translation. The Ukrainian soldiers have told this Russian that they have put a bomb onto the back of his vest, and if he doesn't walk up a kilometer and start encouraging other Russian soldiers to surrender, they'll put the bomb off. The thing is, though, is that they didn't put a bomb in his vest, it's just a twig, and you can see the twig right there, but it makes this guy feel like there is something attached to his back because he never saw what it was.
Тут лежит. Видишь? Скажите просто сколько шагов, я не могу понять. Пройди 3.
This is a very interesting way to persuade someone to make their friend surrender.
Да. Послушай, постой и вернись. Хорошо. Давай. И сказать, сколько от меня метров получается. Если кого-то увидишь, да, ну, иди смотри.
They're now moving on up through the tree line. When you see the Russian with the water bottle, they're now passing him again.
Лучше тот бой, который не состоялся. Так, мы в украинцев переоделись, понял? Мы разведка, ветераны.
We now see that they've gotten another Russian.
Или он ему что говорил? Впереди что ему говорил? Тот, кто встречал только что.
They got that look on their face like, you gonna put a bomb on us too?
Man, he's like, no, don't put a bomb on me.
Мы крайний пост, понял?
Who told you to put the bomb on?
Да.
Я говорю, одни трупы лежат.
Ну, бля, вас кидают как дураков.
You see, this Russian soldier now is also smoking a cigarette.
Понял. Уже понял, да? Мы вас перевалим сейчас, но если все будешь делать, как мы сказали, будет все нормально. Ну, ты уже у нас по факту, понял? Пойди его прими.
Ukrainian unit continues to move out again.
Че ты, батя, ранен?
We can see some soldiers moving through the fog here up to their position. It may have been that they just got themselves a third
проходи,
prisoner.
посиди маленько. Куда? Вперед? Ну проходи, посиди маленько, тут сейчас будет работать пичка, проходи.
Не, бля, а я прошу, что ли?
Иди сюда. Что ты, сука, ищешь? Руки, сука.
We now see him aiming the gun.
Да, сука, сядь. Сука, иди сюда. Ты дебил, мы хохлы, сука, иди сюда.
And it looks like they got a third one.
Прикрывай.
Damn, dude, what is this? Deadliest catch? I mean, like, they're just going out there and they're catching some.
Геройство, сука.
We can now see them moving on back out into
помогай, тут 300,
tree line.
Сюда.
They had 3 Russians at this point. And Gary G asked, they thought they were coming. Wait, hang on. Sorry, wrong question. Woody Stems asked, are those regular Russian troops or just conscripts? At the moment, we don't really know. So they could be conscripts or regulars. We now see a 4th guy that they've captured. They're just going through this tree line. They're just taking everyone. They're just taking everyone. They're just literally like, man, it's like the people from the front office at school that would show up in the classroom and say, we need so-and-so to come with us. They're literally just doing that to the Russian trench workers. They're just going, hey, you, come here. And then they just give up.
Facts.
Никого нету. Да все, слюни подотри. Ты болеешь чем-то? Здоров? Зэк?
Там открытая местность, нахуй, поэтому не стреляли, ебать, потому что, блядь, там, походу, пулемет стоял. Там, походу, и не один, ебать.
Все,
We
пацаны,
hear a
назад.
firefight going on in the distance, and now we hear a firefight beginning here.
Проходим. А? Что?
Fire is now picking up. It sounds as though it may be Russian forces firing at the Ukrainians. We now see them holding their fire as the firefight continues around them.
Пастор, пойди пленных забери, 3 пленных забери.
You know, I will say at least those Russians didn't, you know, just cop out and basically give up.
Yeah, that's true.
The other guys just kind of cowardly gave up the other ones.
Чья рация? Что, свалил, думаю?
Видел, видел.
Что видел?
The firefights now died down.
Вот так вот, аж перекинул нахуй, ебать, нахуй, блядь, и в сторону, блядь. Пацаны, там хохлы, блядь.
And with that, that's the end of the clip, but showing what the 225th Battalion was able to do in the northern area around Berkivka and Yehidna today in the Bakhmut area. Moving on further south, we did see that the 3rd Brigade was continuing the fight and continuing to make some progress in that direction.
Плюс, плюс. Погнали, двоечки, ще одна, пошла. Вони наводяться на сюди.
You can see them moving forward, running up the step that they made up into the street. They're now running across the street and towards what appears to be the railroad track berm again, and now beginning the fights with the Russians another day. You can see them looking into the dugout here and making sure that it's cleared.
Все чисто. Давай, чекай пидоров. Тут просвет, вон они. Блиндаж опять.
Now see them moving into some more dugouts. These are very similar to the ones that Wargonzo met his end in.
Типы, ебать, прикинь. Ага. Кровь.
We now hear some shots flying over the Ukrainian soldiers in this trench.
Шева, Шева, прошей посадку с пулемета.
We now see them firing some Miscellaneous, and that was either an RPG hitting them or they were firing an RPG.
Заходи.
And yes, Angry Penguin, that was the Wargonzo. He was blown away in that video clip that many people have seen at this point.
Нормально, нормально. Въебало осколком, але не знесло. Нормально, іди.
We now see one soldier checking out his arm here.
Алло, бежать, сука, алло!
We now see them returning fire at where the Russians were firing at them earlier.
Три підара рухаються назад по посадці.
Саня, ГП.
We now see them continuing to fire at the Russians, and the firefight is starting to pick up.
Ползи сюда,
I mean, here's some of the soldiers having a fun time with this.
Цинкуй, Сань, чуть-чуть.
Цілий?
Силы?
Цілий? Ебать, прям в окоп, нахуй. Даєш дупля?
Да.
And that's the end of the clip after they appear to have been hit by another RPG. Again, it doesn't appear to have wounded anyone, but still showing the actions and fighting that's going on with the 3rd Brigade in the southern area around Bakhmut. In the next clip, we also saw the Azov, the 3rd Brigade as it's now called, firing a Mr. howitzer in pictures. We can see them getting the ammo ready. We can see that they're putting Big Fella on that one. And in the next picture, we can see them loading the Mr. And then we can see this picture of them firing the Mr. Wow, look at that muzzle flash. That's a lot of muzzle flash. I wonder if they need a compensator for that.
I wonder.
Anyways, very nice to see. Hopefully that shot was accurate. And we're now going to be moving on out of the Bakhmut area and down on into Donetsk, because we saw something really interesting here. In Donetsk, a T-72B3 ended up backing up into a Max Pro during an offensive. I believe the driver was knocked unconscious for a while, and the tank just was backing up and then backed on up into this Max Pro, and it got stuck there. The driver eventually came to, and the entire crew of the tank bailed out, and the crew of the Max Pro also bailed out as well, leaving the two vehicles here on the front. The Ukrainians later came by and ended up reclaiming the area and are most likely going to be recovering the tank and the Max Pro. We can see the tank right there. It's a captured T-72B3. And we can see that that thing wedged itself right onto the Max Pro. We can also see a Ukrainian soldier violating OSHA here, standing under a possible object that may fall. That's the end of the clip, but just really interesting to see. Nothing much more to add. It's just an interesting video. With that, we're going to be moving on into the area of Avdiivka, where we also saw the 3rd Battalion in action against Russian forces. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Wait a minute. This is a duplicate. Oh, whatever. Let me go and delete this one. It's a duplicate. Sorry about that, everyone. There was another clip that was supposed to be there, but it appears that one of the links was duplicated, and so sadly, that clip is lost to all time. With that, we're now going to be moving on down into the area of Marinka, where we saw that the 79th Brigade was attacking Russian forces here. Oh, freedom calls. And I don't know what the hell this thing is up here in the top right, but that's the Yeti, as far as I'm concerned. We can see the Ukrainian tank firing at the Russians in the distance. And we can see them continuing to fire at Russian forces. The tank is laying down that heat. We now see another Ukrainian vehicle moving through a town. And we now see a Ukrainian squad moving past a somewhat destroyed tank. I don't know what that was. That just kind of materialized, so I don't even know where in the world that came from. But we can see it's covering the entire tree line with a smoke cloud. Or a smoke shield, more so. We now see a Sklod BK. I don't know what that is, but we can see that there. It's a Russian group. And we can also see a Ukrainian squad here moving down the tree line away from whatever that is. And now we can see it blowing up. That's why they were running from it, because they rigged it to blow up. We can now see more smoke covers being deployed. We can also see the slag heaps in the background from when the Soviets were mining in this area. And we now see the Ukrainian squad throwing grenades into a Russian trench, and it appears they're about to advance forward and start fighting inside of it. We now see 2 Russian tanks in the field. One of them clearly has a cope cage. The lead one to the right side was just hit near the engine bay, and the engine is on fire. The tank rolls to a stop, and it appears that the crew is most likely going to bail. We now see the Ukrainian infantry in the tree line, meanwhile, advancing into a Russian trench and clearing it on out. We see the Ukrainians still battling around that trench work.
Smokey.
Smokey, bled. Smokey the Bear, bled. And we can now see some Ukrainian soldiers hanging out on the tree line again.
They better turn off gamer tags. They're going to give their position away.
Man, for real, they really are, man. They need to put this thing on realistic mode, blade. But anyways, we can see them tossing some nades into the tree lines again. And also firing through the tree lines of the Russian forces. And, oh, there's one. And we see the Ukrainians still firing through the tree lines. That didn't end well for him, blade.
Bled.
Oh, blade. Oh, no.
200.
200.
Was that points? 200 points for that?
Yeah, 200 points for that one.
Dear goodness.
Oh, dear goodness.
Right.
But with that, that's the end of that clip. By the way, y'all, he was just a little pale. He hadn't really suntanned much. But with that, that's the end of the clip. And once again, showing the actions of the 79th Brigade in the area. With that, we're now going to be moving on up to Kyiv to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on the 483rd day of the war. And so, without further ado, here is the speech. Speech!
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці. Перше фронт. Жорсткі бої, південь. Знищуємо ворога, Донеччина. Знищуємо ворога. Куп'янський напрямок, що б там не планували російські терористи, знищимо ворога. На півдні є наш рух вперед. Дякую, воїни. На сході тримаємо оборону. І особливо вдячні хлопці за кожен збитий російський вертоліт. Кожне таке збиття важливе. Друге, Лондон. Сьогодні почала роботу наша з британцями спеціальна конференція щодо відновлення України. Я дякую Британії за новий пакет фінансової підтримки. Дякую, Америко, за пакет допомоги нашій інфраструктурі та енергетиці. Дякую, Євросоюзе, за представлений пані президенткою Єврокомісії Урсулою фон дер Ляєн фінансовий інструмент для нашої відбудови обсягом 50 мільярдів євро. Сенс цієї конференції в Лондоні не просто у тому, щоб згенерувати зусилля держав наших партнерів, а в тому, щоб нашу трансформацію підтримав і міжнародний бізнес. Зараз в Британії працює українська делегація, уряд, офіс, Верховна Рада, громадський сектор. Кожен аспект українського відновлення і подальшого розвитку нашої держави буде представлений саме тим діячам світового бізнесу, чия увага безпосередньо потрібна нам, нашим індустріям, містам, громадам, країні загалом. Завдання України в тому, щоб моральне лідерство нашого народу трансформувати в економічне лідерство нашої країни. Всі передумови для цього є, передусім у наших людей, у нашого прекрасного, міцного народу. Третє. Нарешті затверджується новий пакет санкцій Євросоюзу проти Росії. Частина з його норм підготовлена за пропозиціями міжнародної санкційної групи, що працює під головуванням Майкла Макфола та Андрія Єрмака. Цей пакет додатково обмежить прибутки Росії, що вона їх досі отримувала в Європі, а також прикриє частину шляхів обходу раніше введених санкцій. Це зараз одне з пріоритетних завдань. Всі наші партнери повністю поінформовані про те, наскільки критично перекрити всі шляхи обходу санкцій. Держава-терорист досі має доступ до різних продуктів та компонентів технологічних та фінансових схем, які створені тими у світі, хто все ж цінує свободу та міжнародне право. Росія має бути в повній ізоляції, поки головні експортні продукти Росії – це зло і смерть. Ще одне. Прийняв вірчі грамоти від послів іноземних держав, які прибули в Україну: Норвегія, Швейцарія, Азербайджан, Пакистан, Ісландія. Нові посли. Загалом в нашій державі працюють вже більше 60 посольств та представництв держав і більше 20 представництв міжнародних організацій. Працювати в Україні, працювати з Україною – це вірити в Україну і в українців. Світ з нами, попри все, що намагається робити держава зло проти нас. 483-й день повномасштабної війни. Саме на нашій державі сфокусовані глобальні надії. І наші люди виправдають ці надії. Свобода переможе. Україна переможе. Я дякую всім, хто воює і працює заради України. Слава усім, хто зміцнює свободу. Слава Україні!
And Slava Ukraini. And that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky. And that is the beginning of a big question. What have y'all been saying about some of the leading questions of the night? And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and jumping right into our first poll on the second question segment of the night, it says Belarus said today it would use newly received Russian nukes to, quote-unquote, deter external aggression. And what are your thoughts? 51% said Belarus is going along with Russia. 40% said it's just tough talk, no concern. 5% said unsure, and 4% said Belarus is diverging from Russia. And I would assume that this was probably all part of the plan when Russia gave Belarus nukes. I think the official statement is that Russia was simply storing the nukes in Belarus, but it sounds like there is some agreement where Belarus might be able to access them to use them as well. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would agree with you on that completely. It sounds like they are going to be using them because they're now making statements where it sounds as though they are actually possessing and possibly going to be able to use the nukes. So with that, I hope that does address that one fairly well. And I think that is largely within Russia's plan when they gave the nukes to Belarus. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next poll says, Putin says Russia will continue improving its armed forces, and is it possible for Russia to fix the military? It looks like 38% said no, it's permanently incompetent. 37% said yes with many years of work. 20% said only when Putin is gone, and 5% said unsure. And on this one, the mere fact that Putin is saying that they need to improve the armed forces tells us that he knows it's in bad shape. Just as bad shape as he thinks it is, I think it's worse off. But I would be with the 37%. I think it would take many, many years of work to ever get the Russian forces up to a decent standard. And that's good for Ukraine because this war is not going to drag out for as long as it would take to fix the military. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be honest. I would say that the Russian military has been screwed throughout all of history. It's never really been that competent of a fighting force and one to be reckoned with, all the way back to Tsar Peter the Great trying to reform the army. Even then, it hardly compared to its European counterparts. And I know many people are about to say, but they won the Second World War and they beat Napoleon. They beat Napoleon because they ran away until winter came and then everyone froze to death, and then they won only because of that. And then in World War II, they just won because of the Lend-Lease. There was really nothing that was involved with the Russian government and the Russian military as its own individual entity that gave them any reason to win anything. They've always been incompetent. So I would say that the Russian military is permanently screwed, and trying to get that level of corruption out of the military, you would pretty much have to dissolve the military and build one back up from the ground up with nothing that existed before. So I would say most likely not going to happen. And so with that, I hope that does address that poll fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next poll says, Zelensky says Ukraine's offensive is going, quote-unquote, slower than desired, but says it's intentional. And what are your thoughts? 48% said it is intentional and strategic for Ukraine to do so. 29% said any progress is good progress. 18% said intentionally slow, question mark. I really don't buy that. And 6% said unsure. And I have to say on this one, I'm going to be in the unsure category. I'm going to have to cop out on this one. I'm really not sure why they would intentionally slow it down. That wouldn't seem to make any sense. But at the same time, I wouldn't say Ukraine is doing poorly. I'm not really sure exactly what to think. But Enforcer, what say you?
Well, look, I don't even know where I am. But I would say, in my opinion, the offensive is going okay. It's not going excellent, though. And the Ukrainians are saying that this is the lead up or a phase in their offensives. And so who's to say that the larger one doesn't come later? We do know that only 30% of their forces are dedicated to the offensive at the moment that's in that area. So there is a lot more potential for them to actually make ground and to actually advance. But then again, we haven't seen that yet. So I would have to also say I'm going to have to declare ignorance on this one, because I think Ukrainian planning has left me completely clueless on what they'll be doing next. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next poll says, do you think the fake bomb tactic is appropriate to use on a POW as seen in the video? It looks like 56% said yes, 26% said no, and 18% said unsure. So we're almost close to 50-50 here. Just about 56% said yes to that being appropriate. And I'll be honest, if we're looking at it from a realistic standpoint, I don't see anything wrong with it, because the Russians do a lot worse stuff to POWs when they capture them. But if we're looking at it from a neutral perspective, I would probably say it's not appropriate. But then again, it's war, and sometimes you have to do what you have to do. That's my perspective. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say I think it's fine, because if you're just telling them something that isn't true, I don't think telling a soldier that you're going to do something is a violation of the rules of war. I think actually doing something like that would be a violation, and they didn't put a bomb on them. They just put a stick on them. So I'd say it's fine. I would say there isn't really that much of an issue with it. And so with that, I hope that does address that poll, in my opinion, fairly well. With that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next poll says, Ukrainian officials said today that they expect Ukraine will be invited to NATO at the Vilnius summit. And what are your thoughts? 35% said, it seems unlikely but possible. 25% said it's naive to believe that. 11% said unsure. And 28% said, I think Ukraine knows what's up. And we heard this statement made by U.S. officials about a couple weeks back. It turned out that they did a full 180 on that and said, no, it's not going to happen. Now the Ukrainian officials are saying that it might happen at the summit. And to be honest with you, I think it's kind of naive to believe that. I don't think they're going to extend membership at that summit, which comes up here in just a few weeks. It seems like all signs are indicating that won't happen, but I guess maybe they've heard something that I don't know. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say it's probably not going to happen, in my honest opinion. The United States would most likely be the one to have to rubber stamp that, and we're still saying that they would have to wait until the end of the war. But then again, the U.S. waffles on everything we say, so we may now be letting them into NATO. Who really knows? So I would say probably unlikely, but it's possible. I would have to go with the 35%. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that being said, we're all out of polls, so we're moving back into our Super Chat questions, and up first, we have a $20 donation from Eshwari, I believe who I said. I'm probably butchering it, but thank you very much for that support. Eshwari, there we go. But thank you for the support. And he said, Enforcer and Enforcer Matt, What is your opinion about the video which potentially shows War Gonzo getting smoked, Doom style?
I gotta be honest with you, I couldn't disapprove of it. Orgonzo was out there on the lines. He ended up picking up a gun, and he ended up getting greased because of it. Honestly, tough stuff for him. And on top of that, he was wanting to genocide Ukrainian women and children. So, he gets what's coming to him. So with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And I guess you could sum up that whole statement to, it is what it is. So with that, thank you once again. I hope that did address that fairly well in two ways. Two ways is better than one. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for supporting this channel and helping us to keep this thing running.
It must have been wild for those Ukrainians just to see War Gonzo, moseying through that trench, because he's, a personality, basically a propagandist. And for him just to mosey through the battlefield, not having a clue what he was doing, to get mowed down, that was probably shocking.
Man, they should rename him from War Gonzo to War Bozo for getting shot like that. So, he's going around there, man, with that trombone or that tuba following him going, boom, bum, 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 bum. And he's just wondering.
Notice all that tough talk he was doing didn't translate to battlefield know-how.
Nah, because folks like that, folks who run their mouths like that a whole load, they never end up following through, because that's the only weapon they have is their mouth running nonstop. Beyond, usually folks like that, in all honesty, they usually beat their wives or something like that to feel some kind of power or authority. It's like, you can't really take anyone seriously like that, because they're just trying to power trip in their heads. And that's also why, I think it's stupid to do that kind of stuff, because it just lets people know very easily you're not going to follow through with anything. You're just loudmouth. But anyways, with that, I hope we addressed that fairly well. Thank you so much once again, Ashwari, for the support. I hope we went back and hit on that a second time. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Trister1, who puts in a generous $20 donation, and thank you, Trister, very much for that support. He says, any idea how many brigades Ukraine is training beyond the present counteroffensive reserves?
Well, I thank you for the support, and I thank you for helping this channel to keep on running, and I hate to tell you, I'm going to have to declare ignorance on that one. I don't think anyone has an exact idea as to how many brigades the Ukrainians are training, because that number is most likely an operational security risk to let out, and unless the Russians have a pretty good idea about the Ukrainian forces' replenishment or growth rates, which could end up being a detrimental factor for the Ukrainians as far as Russian planning goes. So unfortunately, I'd have to declare ignorance on that one. I do thank you for the support, though, and helping this channel to keep on running, but I also don't want to give you an answer that I wouldn't really know, and also one that isn't really out there, because, of course, your support means a lot, and I don't want to sit there and give you an answer that isn't really even out there for me to know, just because. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that kind of addresses why I don't have the answer to that, and with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running.
Yes, indeed. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from Java Junkie, and thank you very much for that support. And he said, what politician is going to make sure we get paid back? By the time this was all said and done, we're out, what, about $500 billion to $1 trillion?
We will probably never get paid back. Wars aren't something that is an investment. Wars are just something that costs money, and that's why usually a lot of countries are on the verge of bankruptcy by the time a war is over. Wars, and trying to find a good way to explain this, there's really no, it's a bit of a misnomer for a lot of folks to say that wars happen because people want to make money off of wars. There aren't really that many people out there who end up profiting off of a war. In fact, it's usually very detrimental to a nation to go to war. And that's always been something whenever you look through the course of history and people go, oh, everyone's just fighting because someone wants to make money. It's like, that's never true. Almost everyone goes broke by the time a war's over. I mean, sure, the arms companies make some money, but it isn't even really that much money. Like, for example, with Boeing, Boeing almost went broke during the 1950s and 60s because the only thing they had were defense contracts, and they weren't getting any civilian contracts, and the defense contracts were just letting them eke by living. They almost died in the 50s and 60s, and Boeing was about to go the way of almost every other airplane company like North American, which isn't even around anymore. And so there isn't really any way to recoup money that goes into a war. Most of it just ends up disappearing. Like, for example, with say a dam, like a hydroelectric dam, like the Hoover Dam, you build it and it's there, and it runs forever. You can make money off of that thing fairly easily. A Bradley, however, if a Bradley gets blown up, there's no way to really make money off of that, especially if it's just blown to smithereens. There's no way to get your money back out of that thing because it's just gone. It's blown up and it won't ever exist again. And the Ukrainians only have so much money to give, and a lot of the equipment we're giving them, we're not really asking for any repayment on. They're not lend-lease vehicles. They're just given to them. They're practically donations. So, to be honest with you, there won't really be any way to recoup the money, and also, there is a lot more incentives monetarily involved than just trying to get our money back and then some with interest off of the vehicles we give them. American companies and American investment firms are investing in Ukraine, and if they invest in Ukraine and their enterprises in Ukraine end up being successful, they make money, and hopefully the U.S. makes money off of that as well, and hopefully some of that money ends up being spent here in America. And so that's kind of the benefit of sending over billions or tens of billions or even hundreds of billions of dollars of military support to Ukraine, is that in the end we'll get a new economic partner and we'll get long-term economic benefits from a new economy entering the fold. Look at Poland, look at South Korea, and look at Japan, and those are countries we ended up spending massive amounts of money on defensively, and we ended up reaping the benefits greatly. Poland, though, we only started spending massively on them in terms of defense ever since the 90s, but we still have reaped the rewards of doing such a thing through their economy booming after we ended up arriving. So with that,
also another catch is for the folks that are saying we should not fund Ukraine, what is the alternative? Because we have to protect our interest over there, because if Russia is able to take Ukraine, that emboldens them to move on to potentially the other Baltic states and eventually into a NATO country. So if we don't send a message now by spending money up front, we're going to have a much more expensive and much more costly war on every single front if we allow it to continue. So it's a upfront investment to avoid a more expensive investment.
And that kind of ties into some things that I hear over here. And here are some common things I hear about the war. It's not our problem. It is our problem. You see, you can't sit here as the United States, and we can't call ourselves the leader of the free world, which isn't just a magical title we say to make ourselves feel good. That is the legitimate truth. We are the largest economy in the Western world. We are the largest military force in the Western world. We are one of the largest countries in every single measure in the Western world. We are the leader of this entire alliance that we have here in the West. That includes Europe, Canada, Australia, some of South America, although that's kind of, not really a thing anymore, and also Southeast Asia, as well as East Asia as well. We are the leader of that. And we can't sit there and try and have a sphere of influence and then just flake out whenever we have to protect our sphere of influence. You see, this sounds weird because it sounds almost imperialistic, but Europe is our stuff. America is also Europe's stuff. It's all a part of the same thing. And so we can't sit there and go, oh, it's over in Europe, that's not our problem, because we make money off of Europe. Europe makes money off of us. It's a mutualistic exchange economically. And if we don't end up defending what's ours, or what's a part of our alliance, it's very weird to say what's ours as an American, because, it's more of a mutual alliance. It's not like we conquered Europe or anything. Everyone just kind of decided to spend all of their money in the same place, which is in between Europe, America, and East Asia. If we don't defend what we have, we'll end up losing it. And one thing that people don't get out there is that you can't sit there and let people encroach on your stuff, like our alliance, our Western World Alliance. If we allow the Chinese to encroach on that, and we allow the Russians to encroach on that, and every single time they do, we sit there and go, it's not our problem, it's someone else's problem, we're going to end up with nothing. And China's going to be in the position the United States is in right now, or Russia will eventually end up in a position like China is in at this moment. We can't let that happen. This is not a world where everything's fair and everyone shares and everyone gets along. The world is a nasty place, and either you're on top of the heap or you're on the bottom of the heap getting a boot put on you by everyone. And we want to make sure that the United States and the Western world as a whole, because it's not just America that reaps the benefits of this, it's every single ally that we have. We want to make sure that the Western alliance stays on top of the heap. We do not want to fall under China. We do not want to fall under Russia, which will never happen, but we don't want to fall under China. and allowing either of those countries to continue to grow their influence and grow their economies, with us just sitting on the side and saying, oh, we don't want to spend the money, it may be too expensive, we'll end up having no money left. Every other economy in the world will end up turning over to China, most likely. Like, we can already see that happening somewhat with France, with Macron saying that the United States, well, France needs to stop being an American vassal, that kind of stuff. We eventually will have no friends. We'll have no one to go and trade with and make money off of, because usually economic growth comes from trade. And then we're ending up on, Crab Creek without a paddle. So, it's rather, would you want to spend the money now and stay on top of the heap, which is just a part of being up here as number one in the world and being a part of the largest economic alliance and military alliance in the world? Or would you rather not? And would you rather end up being in a position like Russia or China, where you're at the whims of another country? And then on top of that, since we're on this topic, I saw someone bring up something interesting in my comments section as well. They said, I disagree with the enforcer saying that the United States should possibly consider military intervention in Cuba because we condemn the Russians when they're doing that in Ukraine. There's a little bit of a difference. A lot of people think that geopolitics is supposed to be fair. Geopolitics is inherently unfair. You're supposed to be saying that what you're doing is right and what other people are doing is wrong. Because if everything was done fairly, we would end up having Europe again with the Russians and just giving half of it to them because that's fair. That's not how the world works. Everyone is constantly trying to be on top of things. They want to have everyone in a bad position compared to them. And that's what the Russians are doing right here. We're not trying to be in a bad position because it's fair. We're trying to be in a position where the Russians can't really do anything, and U.S. forces are ready to march into their borders at any minute, where they do not want to do anything, and they'll stay on the back burner forever. And so that's why I say that military intervention in Cuba, if the Russians want to set up a military base there or the Chinese want to, is fine, because geopolitics is never supposed to be fair. That's why the Russians justify everything they do, and then they condemn everything everyone else does, although it's the exact same thing they're doing, and that's also why we do vice versa, because it's never fair. But with that, hope that does address all of that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 super chat from none other than Santiago Flores. And thank you, Santiago, very much for that support. Excuse me. He says, good evening, guys. This is for the air conditioner fan for the podcast. And would it be ironic as Bakhmut becomes Stalingrad for the orcs? Cheers.
Thank you so much for the support. And I hope that does... I hope that kind of addresses that fairly. Why the hell am I saying that so early? I didn't even address it. I'm having like a loop in my head right here. But I got to thank you for the support, and I got to thank you for the air conditioning fund for the podcast, because we've tried to fix it a little bit. It's still warm over there, though. I'm not going to lie, and I got to thank you for supporting that. And hopefully it would. It looks like it kind of has, because they're still fighting to death to try and hold what they have up there, and it's not really ending up well for them. And also, look, they still have Bachmut and Sanley views it was before the battle actually happened there. I had to zoom in on that because it's like, does it still look like it's pre-battle here? And it does. But anyways, moving off of that and back into what we were talking about, it probably is going to end up being a Stalingrad for them, because it appears that the 3rd Brigade is still making progress on the southern flank, and they're either going to get encircled or they're going to have to retreat from the town. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support, and thank you for enjoying this channel enough to support it and help us to keep this thing running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, real quick, I saw something that Java Junkie said in response to the answer to the question. And they said, while I certainly want Ukraine to get its territory back, it shouldn't be at U.S. taxpayers' expense. But here's the catch, though. If Ukraine does not have the money, we're left with only one option. We can either give them the stuff and hope that we get a return on our investment by keeping Russia out of Ukraine and away from NATO's borders, or we can sit back and let Ukraine basically be taken over, which is going to make the situation much worse, in my opinion. But Enforcer, would you like to add in?
Yes, and that is an interesting point. And that's a point that's brought up by some folks who were against the United States' support or world support for Ukraine here in America. In response to that, I would have to say that ever since we've taken the mantle from the British here in the Western world as kind of being the leaders of the Western world around the 1920s and 1930s, that has been what we have constantly had to do around the world. We go everywhere, and we spend massive amounts of money to support countries that we want to win, and we also send our own soldiers over there to go and die in these wars, so that way the U.S. can stay on top of things. We did that in Korea, we did that in Vietnam, Of course, Vietnam was not successful. Of course, everyone knows that. But we still did that nonetheless. We gave them massive amounts of monetary support, military support, and we also sent our own soldiers over there to fight in that war to try and ensure that our own strategic aims were established there. We have done that throughout all of history. We did that in Iraq and Afghanistan as well. And it doesn't really make a lot of sense that as being the leader of the free world and understanding that we've had to do that ever since we become the leader of the free world for nearly 80 years, well, really, it's getting close to nearly 100 years at this point. We've been the quote-unquote leader of the free world. It's a little weird at this point. We would begin to step back and go, oh, you know, we can't go and invest in strategic opportunities across the world because it may not help out the taxpayer. But the thing is that is a part of the of what taxpayers have been doing for nearly 100 years. We've been constantly supporting countries around the world. We've been constantly growing the Western sphere of influence. We've been expanding it to other countries. We did that with Poland. I mean, like, hell, as soon as Poland broke out of the Warsaw Pact, we were almost there immediately. And that's why the Polish GDP and a lot of the Baltic states' GDPs have grown so rapidly, is because we end up investing money from the US, sometimes from the taxpayers, and also investment firms, into those countries. And it ends up benefiting us in the long run. They're now strong economies that we trade with. We make money off of them. And we had to put up an initial investment. Sure, it looked expensive at the start, but over the long run of decades of constant trade and constant profits with these countries, it ends up paying off tenfold. And I think that it's really just a part of life that taxpayers end up paying for this kind of stuff, especially when your country is the leader of the free world. Now, if we wanted to, say, let's just say if we wanted the Chinese to start censoring everything that Americans could say, and we wanted the United States to be heavily swayed by the Chinese here in the next 20 or 30 years, yeah, we could drop supporting everyone in the world, and we could just let the Chinese take up our entire Western sphere within the next few decades, and we could be at the whim or have the boot on our neck of the Chinese, or for that matter, even the Russians, if we just sit there and pull back from everything. And that's what will happen. So we either spend a decent amount, and the taxpayers recognize that that's a part of being a leader of the free world, so we spend a massive amount to stay on top of this heap, or we end up falling to the very bottom of it. That's kind of the bottom line. And so with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, in my opinion. And also, hang on, I can't leave it there. I've got to go and get a historical example because I just remember this. Britain was the leader of the free world for a long time, and and people are going to say, oh, but they had an empire. For the large part, people look to them to lead the Western sphere. The Western sphere wasn't really as hardcore as it was now. But back in the day when they were the leaders of the supposed free world, or the Western sphere as we'll call it, because, you can kind of make an argument whether it was free or not in the colonies, they were the ones that were spending massive amounts of money. They had the largest navy in the world, which was the way that they power projected, and if anything started to happen that started to interdict with their sphere of influence, or started to interdict with their interests, they would pour massive amounts of money into fixing that problem. That's why the Boxer Rebellion happened. That's why there were 2 opium wars with the Chinese. That's why they ended up invading Afghanistan in the 1840s. That's why they ended up doing all kinds of stuff throughout the 120 years that they would kind of be the leaders of the Western world. That is why they did that, and they spent massive amounts of money doing it. Being on top of things is not cheap. It's the most expensive thing that you can do as a country, but the benefits far outweigh the costs, and that's why we have to continue to spend money like this, and we have to continue to support Ukraine, because that's just a part of us being the strategic leader of the Western world and the economic leader of the Western world as well. But with that, I hope that also gives a little bit of a historical example with the British as to how they also had to do the same thing. It's just part of taking up the mantle of being the leader. But with that, hope that does address that fairly well, and also a very interesting point that you made, and I hope that I addressed it fairly well. Maybe you see our side. If you don't, everyone's got an opinion. So with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a very generous $20 donation from also BC Skyman, who I believe has already left for the night, if I'm not mistaken.
Aww.
But BC, thank you very much for that support, and sadly, no comment to address. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, BC Skyman. You are an old guard of this channel, and not only that, have supported this channel for an incredibly long time and have helped us to keep this thing rolling. And I thank you so much for appreciating our work and supporting us so that way we can keep it running. And so with that, Thank you so much. I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, I have to address this real quick because someone brought this up in the live chat, and I think it's a great point. Benjamin Reynolds said, the British abolished slavery, which the British taxpayer only finished paying off just in recent years. And that actually may be a bit of a shock to some people, because a lot of people actually hear that the British Empire was not a force of good around the world, but many people may be interested to hear that the British were actually one of the first countries in the world to abolish slavery outright, and in fact used the overwhelming power of the Royal Navy to enforce that onto other countries, and nearly went to war with some of the largest powers in Europe, like France, and I believe it was the 1830s, to make sure that they no longer permitted slavery. In fact, that's the only reason that the United States in 1809 ended up banning the import of slaves to our country, is because the British started to threaten the intervention of the Royal Navy and a blockade if we didn't begin to forbid the import of slaves, which is a very interesting thing that the British did, and once again, a part of them being the leader of the free world. They put massive expense into that navy. The British had the largest navy in the world for several hundred years, and part of that was them trying to carry through their idea of what liberty was, which was the abolishment of slavery. And they ended up doing pretty good at that job, especially in the colonies. They ended up abolishing slavery across the entirety of it, and they also ended up influencing many other countries, like the French, to also drop slavery and largely abolish it as well. The United States, though, was a little bit of a different story, and the reason being, just to go down this rabbit hole for a minute, the reason why the U.S. had slavery for so long while many other countries didn't is because the United States was one of the few countries where slaves didn't come and end up pretty much dying. In the Caribbean, there was actually a negative growth rate of slave populations because the conditions were so harsh, they would just die, and so you had to constantly import new slaves to be able to keep a constant slave population. The United States was different in that slave populations actually grew once they arrived because the conditions were more hospitable. And so while a lot of the countries around the world, thanks to the British, would end up abolishing slavery by the 1820s and 30s, at the United States it would continue on until the 1860s because the British couldn't really come into America and stop the slavery that existed there. They could stop new slaves from coming in, but they really couldn't contain the slavery issue that was happening in the United States all the way up until the 1860s. But that's a story for a whole other time. Anyways, we're on to the next one. Thank you once again for the support, and I hope we addressed that fairly well.
All right, and real quick before we move on to our next super chat, I wanted to address a poll that was just put up. And the question is, should the West provide Ukraine with weapons free of charge or demand repayment? 64% said give it free of charge, 19% said demand repayment, and 17% said unsure and undecided. And on this one, I'm actually going to be in between. If Ukraine does not have the money to buy the weaponry from us, I would say give it free of charge because security of NATO is most important, and I think Ukraine is vital to that. But if they do have some money, I would demand repayment at some point. I think that's reasonable to get paid back for at least some of the equipment because Ukraine will have some money at some point, and that would be fair. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say I would give it free of charge, actually. I'd have to agree with the 64% there because it's mostly going to be a massive benefit for us for them to win. We don't want them to have the economic burden of having to repay tens of billions, if not hundreds of billions of dollars. That would probably be better for them to put into their own economy and grow it, which will make us more money over the long term. So I would say give it free of charge. Also, I saw some people in the live chat. Let me phrase this properly because it seems some people are going to try and take my wordage out of context. Someone said hospitable in reference to the slave populations here in America. Right. Well, hospitable in that term is relative. Would you call it hospitable? And we're talking of a scale here about what slaves were living in condition-wise at that time. When you're talking about a country like Haiti, where slaves don't even live to adulthood, they just die from being worked to death in the horrendous conditions there, I would say as a relative term, it was hospitable in America because slaves would actually live to adulthood and actually have children. So, of course, it's not hospitable by a modern term or by a free term, but by a slavery term in the Americas. Slavery in the United States was far more hospitable than it was in the Spanish colonies or in the French and British colonies in the Caribbean until slavery was forbidden, where slaves would die before they even reached adulthood. So if you're putting it on that relative scale, it is far more hospitable. I'm not saying, though, that slavery is great or anything, and it looks like some people are going to try and take that out of context and say that. No, I'm not saying slavery is great. Slavery is terrible. But compared to the time and what slaves were living in at that time, the conditions in America were far better than they were in the Caribbean. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And with that being said, we're on to our next super chat, which goes to Tim Q, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you, Tim, very much for that support. He says an F-150 with a machine gun in the back is a modern version of Tachanka, used for a great effect during the Civil War 100 years ago, in particular in Ukraine.
And I got to thank you for the support, and that is true. And speaking of which, the Tachanka, and let me see if I can pull one up, the Tachanka wagon is pretty neat, because this would be about the first technicals we would ever see. You can see one right here. It's just a wagon with a Maxim gun mounted onto the back of it. They would ride this thing across the plain, and then they would spin it around, and the machine gunner would spray down some withering fire onto some infantry on the plain, and then they would take back off. And so it's pretty cool to think that was pretty much the first technical. The first time a machine gun was used like that in modern war. And I would say that the F-150 with the 30mm on the back of it is certainly the modern version of a Tachanka, and really cool to see that they're returning to the plains of Ukraine. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to David Lineker, I believe it said. And David put in a $20 donation, and thank you very much for that support. And sadly, no comment left. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say thank you so much for the support, David, and helping this channel to keep on running. You didn't throw in a comment, but the support does help us to keep doing this. And I got to thank you so much once again for appreciating our work and supporting us, so that way we can continue on our work of covering the news of this war and also fundraising for Ukraine. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Junebug72, who is a longtime channel viewer, who puts in an $18 donation. And thank you very much for that support. He said, hello. Sorry, critical hardship struck our family. Moving and missed y'all, and I can't stay tonight, but will lurk on and off. And my best to you and your brother, and Slav Ukraine. And also best to you, Junebug, and I hope the problems get sorted out.
And thank you so much once again for the support, Junebug. I hope it does get sorted out. And also, welcome back. We haven't seen you in a while, and it's good to have you back. And I hate to hear that you have to go. I don't know if you're on right now watching this, but I hope everything is going good, and I hope everything does get sorted out in the background. And I thank you so much once again for joining us tonight. Hopefully, enjoying the stream as well, and supporting us, so that way you can, so that way we can keep this thing running and keep on doing this as a job. And so, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Mr. Diggs, who puts in a $10 donation and says, let's see here. A band called Boney M out of Germany in '78, they sang a song called Rasputin. This song is a huge TikTok success. Oh, goodness. The lyrics are hilarious and very germane to Putin to this day.
Isn't that the one that goes, rah, rah, Rasputin, lover of the Russian queen? Is that the one?
So.
I think that is
Probably.
the one. But still, it is a huge TikTok success. It was really a big success even before TikTok. And I got to thank you so much once again for the support and bringing that up, because that is a meme that was around when we were in high school. And I remember people used to play that song every once in a while. It was always played in the band kid circle, though. I don't know why. I didn't really make it outside of that. But still, I got to thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And also, pretty funny to remind us of that song. And it is one that became really popular here in the modern day. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Lucas Sandlin, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much for that support. And he said, hey, Enforcer, do you think Putin blew the dam because he knew about the nuclear power problems and used this to force Ukraine to come to the table? Or am I giving him too much credit? Slav Ukraine.
Slav Ukraine. And thank you for the support. I would say it's most likely a completely separate thing. I think that would just be too much planning on the Russians' end to be possible, really. You know, not to disparage them of any credit. There's really no credit to give them. But I would say that's probably not the case. The dam was probably blown up as a completely separate incident regarding the counteroffensive, and then the nuclear power plant probably wasn't even considered until after the fact. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and I thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to White Lightning 777, who puts in a $7.77 donation. And thank you, White Lightning, very much for that support. They said, if Prigozhin successfully takes over Russia from Putin, do you think he'll stop the war in exchange for a bribe?
Exchange for a bribe? Give me $100 war ends. Dude, you're the leader of Russia. Yeah, but still $100 is $100, Blia. I would say...
He'll say, if you can bring back my hair, I'll end the war.
Dude, everyone would go, good luck, pal. They'd be like, good luck, man. There's
no, the West would be like, we'll bring in our best doctors.
Yeah, we'll bring in our best. We'll do you like Elon Musk's hairline. It'll be perfect. But it's... I bet he was balding. But anyways, to answer that, I would say maybe. Prigozhin seems to be easily bought or won over. But then again, that could apply in the opposite direction. So I would say possibly. I would say that's not out of the question. I would say it's possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, it appears that me trying to cover a historical topic about what was going on with the British and everything like that has started to bring some politics into our chat. I would ask that y'all refrain from politics. We do not talk about politics here, whether it be American or international, because politics is something we completely avoid. All I was doing was talking about history and what the British had done, and also how that expanded into the Caribbean and the southeastern United States. Had nothing to do with politics, and I have seen some people trying to move that into that topic, but that was all trying to talk about what it's like being the leader of the free world and what countries have done as being leaders of the free world and the massive expense that they had to endure because of that. So if everyone could refrain from politics, I would ask that y'all please do. And so with that, and also it's not really a request, it's more of a rule. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from a recent graduate of medicine. And congratulations on recently graduating. And I said, Enforcer, who's expected to rebuild Ukraine after all this mess if Russia doesn't take over the country and withdraw?
The United States is largely expected to rebuild Ukraine after the war is over. It seems as though massive investment firms from America are already moving in and trying to get involved right now, and so we will probably end up being the ones who largely rebuild them. There's probably other countries that'll hop in. For example, the Japanese and the Germans will most likely be the next in line after America to hop in, because the Japanese and the Germans are the two other largest economies in the Western world outside of the United States, and so they'll probably try and hop in as well, but it won't be as massive of a contribution as the United States is. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and thank you so much once again for support, and a really interesting question as well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Badger Resistance, who says, did the West wait too long to give Ukraine the necessary weapons to be successful in this offensive, and now Russia is too dug in and too prepared?
I would say probably not. It's really hard to tell because the offensive seems to have been a somewhat slow progress, but Ukraine is also saying they haven't pulled out all the stops yet. So it's really hard to tell whether they've gotten all the support they needed or not at this moment, because we haven't heard them say, or we haven't seen them go all out and then see them fail. So it'd be really hard to say that at this moment. I would say, however, regardless whether they did get enough to succeed or fail, we should have given more support at this point. I'm always a massive proponent of sending as much support to Ukraine as possible, bar everything else, just get the support there. And it seems as though we've been trying to drag our feet on that with like the misaccounting, with the timetables that we give. It seems like we were dragging our feet. So I would say I think we could send more support to Ukraine, and we could have sent more already. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again for support, Badger Resistance, and a very interesting question as well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Dark Warrior 137, who puts in a 5 and says, did you ever see some footage of a Russian unit pushing some Ukrainians back after clearing their trench? Yeah, neither did I, and Slav Ukraine.
Dan, thank you for the support. I was about to be like, no. I was like, I haven't. But still, thank you for the support and helping the show to keep on running. I guess that kind of addressed itself. All while Matthew does a laugh, but still, thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope we address that the best we can. Kind of answered itself. And with that, we are on to the next one. Thank you so much once again for appreciating the work we do and supporting us, so that way we can keep on doing it. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to CK Bold, who puts in a 5 and says, take a live chat question. And of course we will, CK Bold, and thank you very much for that support. And let's see. Hold on just a second here. There we go. So we're going to go take that live chat question in honor of CK Bold.
Unfortunate, very unfortunate. I saw what happened right there, and it looks like, sadly, they got axed. But anyways, let's get that live chat from CK Bold.
And the live chat question goes to Colin Barrett, who says, should NATO supply Ukraine with tactical nukes as compensation for their 1994 security guarantees not being honored?
I would say no. In my honest opinion, I'm not really a big fan of nuclear proliferation. That's a very hard word for me to say. Very sorry about that. Not really a big fan of that, and I think that the number of nuclear weapons around the world should be limited instead of expanded, and also we should make sure to limit the number of countries that get them, and I think that would be against the that idea to give Ukraine tactical nuclear weapons. On top of that, it's possible in the next few decades they could go rogue. You know, it's not out of the question. And then we have a rogue country that has tactical nuclear weapons, and that starts to compound the problem greatly. So with that, I hope that addresses that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And thank you once again, CK Bold, for sponsoring that live chat. And thank you once again for supporting this channel and helping us to keep this thing running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Dupper Bob, who puts in a 2 and sadly does not leave a comment, as well as Tuxedo Panther, who puts in a 2 as well and no comment. Thank you, Dupper and Tuxedo, very much for that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank the both of y'all so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on rolling, because folks like y'all make this channel possible, especially Dupper Bob, who has put in that $2 support every single day since he's been here, and that's been for hundreds of days. And I got to thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like y'all make it possible. Y'all make it possible for everything to happen behind the scenes where we're able to do this as a job. And so thank you so much once again to both of y'all. I hope that does address both of y'all's support fairly well, because every bit counts and every bit helps us to keep this thing on air. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to Persona Incognito, who puts in a 2 and says, I want Lavrov behind bars in The Hague.
In The Hague?
In The Hague.
In The Hague? Well, I thank you for the support. I would like to see that as well, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen. And anyways, if he becomes a rat, that probably will never happen, because the Ukrainians will probably try and make it beneficial for him to be a rat. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I would love to see that. Who knows? Maybe one day we will. And with that, we are on to the next one. I hope we addressed that fairly well.
And you know, I have to say this because it was funny, and I mean this in good humor. If the person is watching that I'm referring to, this is a joke. But I do know somebody that pronounced The Hague a lot differently, and they called it the hog. So I was always finding that pretty funny, and the Enforcer wanted to mention that a while back, but he didn't. So, you know, funny little point, Enforcer. He's gone silent. He's reading all the chat questions.
And I'm telling you, man, well, actually, I was waiting for you to get done talking. I was like, I was just sitting there patiently waiting. Then you call me out. Call him out. But anyways, yeah, you know, I would say hopefully he'll be high on the hog here soon, if that's what The Hague is. But with that, hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Russell Rizzo, and thank you very much for that support. They said, have you seen the show, quote unquote, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia? It's the longest running and best comedy on TV. You'll like it. New episode, Frank versus Russia.
And I got to thank you for the support, Ross Rizzo. And I got to say, we got the Rizzler in here. But I would say, no, I have not seen It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I've seen Seinfeld, though, and I really like Seinfeld. If It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia is like Seinfeld, I probably like it, but I've never seen it, and I will try and watch that episode if I can. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well, and with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for asking an interesting question, Russ Rizzo. Honestly, during the question segment, it's a great reprieve for us to hear questions that aren't always necessarily about the war. I know we don't really rabbit hole much. That's mostly because people just complain nonstop about that. But we do love to go down rabbit holes. Me personally, I really love to go down them. And it's always great to hear interesting ones like that, like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, because I've actually never heard of that show, and it gives us some ideas of things to watch if we ever get the time to watch anything after the stream. But with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And Kaltenberg said they hated Seinfeld. Why? Why? It's not bad. It's a good show. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $2 super chat from RoyCC02. He says you can switch to satellite on Deep State.
And thank you for the support. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I did know that. It's just that I like to use Deep State, though, in this color format, because when we switch to satellite, it's really hard to tell what's going on down here. Like, when you zoom in here, well, actually, it's not that hard to tell what's going on. I don't know why in the world I've always decided to not do that. We could... Well, I mean, now I remember why. Because I can't go into Street View and stuff on that map. It does do the satellite view, but I can't go and drop down onto Street View, and we can do that on Google Maps every once in a while, and we can look at other stuff. And I thank you for the support and sharing that with us. We did know that already, but I actually never knew that it was that high of fidelity where you could actually zoom in fairly well and see the individual houses. Well, at least a little. I mean, like, you know, they are like in 240p, but you can see them. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support and sharing that little tidbit with us. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that being said, we're all out of super chat questions. So once again, thank you all for that support. And we're moving on to our live chat questions. And of course, we have the Morse code decoders first. Who says? I actually don't say. It's Mark Hodges, Steve Hay, Cliff Simonson, Earl Bernew, and Paul Schultz. They said the Morse code tonight says Russia cannot keep the war going much longer, maybe only a year. Glory to Crane. Long live the LSA.
That's the sound of money. It sounds like there were a couple of typos in that one, because I do make sure to spell check those. I don't have any typos in those. But y'all did get the Morse code message correct. Whoever sent that one in, though, that one may have been a little bit, you know, had a letter missing here and there. I don't know, maybe the Morse code translator I was using cut out a few letters. But that is the correct message. And hopefully Ukrainians will be able to win over the Russians in the long run. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you all for deciphering that Morse code message for the 483rd day of the war. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and we have one more super chat that just came in from Philip Fixes LSA, who put in a 5 and said historians aren't apologists, they just have a contextual perspective, loving the overvaluation tactic, extra aid without going through Congress. Slava LSA.
And Slava the LSA and Slava Ukraini. And thank you for the support. And that is one thing that kind of did annoy me, honestly, because, you know, because when I was sitting there and talking about that, to revisit that for just a quick second, I'm sitting here talking about, you know, slavery in the Americas, and I'm talking about how slaves are dying within 2 or 3 years of reaching the Caribbean in Hispaniola, which is Cuba, or Haiti, or the Dominican Republic, which I believe was, let me think, it was a Spanish colony on this side. It was French on this side. But I forgot what the hell they called Haiti before it became its own country. But anyways, moving off of that, I'm talking about how bad slavery was down there, where slaves would die within 2 to 3 years of arriving there just because the conditions were so harsh. And then I say, in a relative sense, it was more hospitable in the United States. And then someone goes, more hospitable? Sure. You know, it's like, well, you know, I'm not talking about, you know, saying, oh, you know, slavery is wonderful or something. I'm talking about a historical perspective of what's more hospitable, dying in 3 years or living to adulthood and being able to have children. It's like, obviously, talking relatively, that's more hospitable. And then people want to take that out of context. You know, and it's something I try to deal with when talking about historical stuff, because in college level history classes, it is just explained that way, because that's just the information. That's what it is. And then when you say that, then people for some reason want to go, oh, you know, and it's like, well, it's relative. You know, it's like, that's like saying, you know, the equality for you know, people who are impoverished in America are far better than the quality of life for impoverished people in Africa. And then someone goes, oh, sure. You know, it's like, well, it is. It's relative, but it is. You know, it's like, I don't know what the hell people are looking for there. You know, not to get extremely aggravated at that or anything, but being a history major, whenever you just talked about that stuff and said that kind of stuff, it was relative. It wasn't trying to sit there and condone it or anything. It's just saying what it is. But I got to thank you for appreciating that, because that's the way you're taught to write and talk about stuff. With being a history major, that's how you just talk about historical aspects of stuff. And I got to thank you so much once again for enjoying that and for appreciating that. And also, I would say, in my honest opinion, I actually have to disagree with you on the evaluation stuff. Because if they had actually properly valued the equipment, then, you know, they would already have been able to send all of it already in a larger portion. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one is a live chat question. This one goes to Jay Bagwell, who says, question, I believe Prigozhin was referencing Shoigu in that video, who has Italian-style frescoes of his likeness painted on the walls of the Russian MOD.
And I think he does. I think it's actually the Russian Ministry of Defense Cathedral. Let me find that. Russian Ministry of Defense Cathedral. Because they actually have a specific one, and I've seen this thing before. And so here it is.
Bam!
Yeah, it's and also it looks so freaking dark in there. You know, it doesn't look like a normal cathedral where it's bright and it's, you know, filled with light. It's all dark in this place. Honestly, it kind of looks a little, well, you know, not so great.
Looks a little sketchy.
Yeah, it looks a little sketchy. I'm not going to lie, but I'm trying to find the Shoigu one. Let's see. There's Shoigu. Let's see here. Where the hell's the Shoigu one?
I don't know about bringing the military to a church. Something about that seems a little off.
Let me type that in. Maybe we'll find it. He's in there somewhere. I did hear that as well. I've never seen a picture of it. Wait a minute. Putin and Stalin exalted beside angels in Russian's quote-unquote pagan temple. Oh yeah, that's not really that bad of a name for it, but there's Putin. Well, no, sorry, there's Stalin. Where the hell is Putin, though? I'm not seeing Putin. At least in that one. But I think this is some of Russia's most prominent generals throughout its history. But yeah, it is pretty bizarre. And honestly, I don't really think war and Christianity really mix. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. But, you know, the Russians are very weird. And once again, the Eastern Orthodox Church is largely an apparatus of the Russian government at this point. So they kind of have to tie it into the government. Well, they have to tie it into the government. And this is the way they do it, which is pretty messed up. But still, with that, thank you once again for bringing that up, J-Bag. Well, I couldn't find a picture of it, but I hope that was good enough. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to M. Peacock, who says, how many Patriot systems are functional in Ukraine?
The Patriot, I think there's maybe 2 batteries of functional Patriot missile systems in Ukraine at this point, but I don't think that number's ever been confirmed. It may even be 3, but we know that there's certainly at least 2. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Richard Rohde, who says, would a sonic boom explode a mine? I'm thinking of an SR-71 flyby at like Mach 3.5 at, say, 300-foot altitude.
Sadly, I don't think it would blow up the mine. There's also some physics there that would probably cause a problem. Most of the high-speed planes, like the SR-71, can only reach their top speed at some of the highest altitudes that aircraft have ever flown at. Think anywhere in between 30,000 and 60,000 feet. That's really the only altitudes those aircraft can reach those speeds. Air resistance near sea level is actually so strong that most aircraft that can even be capable of Mach 2.5 can really only get up to around Mach 1.2 before they just cannot go any faster because the air resistance is too strong. Or, you know, if they continue to go faster, the air resistance will be so strong it'll rip apart the aircraft. So sadly, it wouldn't be able to go Mach 3.5, 300 feet above the ground. And I don't think it would blow up a mine even if they were breaking the sound barrier at, say, Mach 1.2 or even Mach 3.5, because it isn't really weight being imparted onto the ground. It's just the shock of all of the sound being compressed into an incredibly small area. So I would say most likely it most likely would not be possible, because if the sound wave was able to blow up a mine, it would also be able to kill people, and aircraft breaking the sound barriers don't end up killing people with the sonic booms. So I don't think that would be possible, but it was still an interesting question though, and I hope I answered that fairly well, at least from what I understand about sonic booms and things like that. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And our next question goes to Margaret Hemsley, who says, can the Russian Air Forces be more involved than they already are?
The Russian Air Forces could be more involved, but that would be taking much higher losses than they are at the moment. And they were taking incredibly high losses at the war when they were heavily involved. And that's why we see that the Russian Air Force is involved far less at this point in the war. And so with that, I hope we addressed that one fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And our next question goes to Jorge M. Rivera, who says, do you believe the dry water reserve can become a highway for Ukrainian troops?
I would say Maybe. It may be able to become a highway for Ukrainian troops, but I'm not exactly sure because it would depend on the ground conditions, among many other things, and I don't have all of that information with me, so I'd have to declare ignorance on that. But with that, hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Neil Vizanant, who says, on the subject of taxpayers, what do you think about the idea of letting weapons companies deal with Ukraine directly?
I don't really see much wrong with that as long as it's with the blessing of the U.S. government. As far as the kind of weapons they can sell to Ukraine, I think that would be fine. But I don't think it would be a good idea for, say, Lockheed Martin to go over there and start offering F-35s. That's something we might want to say, no, you cannot do for national security reasons. But beyond that, I think there would be nothing really wrong with that, in my opinion. I would endorse that if I was the president. And so with that, thank you so much for the support, Neil. I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next live chat question goes to AntOQC, who says, why don't the Ukrainians use artillery or grenade launchers to destroy the mines and thus clear the path for vehicles?
Good question. They do not use grenades because grenades usually can't explode with enough force to blow up AT mines. They probably could blow up AP mines, anti-personnel mines, but AT mines would be pretty tough. Artillery could blow up those anti-tank mines, but that would pretty much mean getting a direct hit onto the mine itself, and beyond that, it probably wouldn't blow up the mine. So it would take ungodly levels of accuracy. You would pretty much have to hit a pinpoint target from miles away with an artillery piece to be able to clear a minefield. You'd have to do that several dozen times to clear an actual path through it. So that's probably why they don't do that, is because one, it would be too difficult from a skill level for the artillerist to do, and second, the hand grenades may not be able to clear all of the mines. So it will be able to clear anti-personnel mines, but it wouldn't be able to clear the anti-tank mines just due to the force not being present. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least from how I understand it. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Sarah A., who says, whatever happened to the Russian Freedom Military?
The Russian Liberation Army, from what we understand, is still in Shebekino, but we don't get any news from there anymore, and we don't really hear a lot about them, so I don't really know. They're there, they still exist, but they don't really have a lot of news talked about on them anymore. I don't really know why. But with that, I hope that does address that, at least the best I know, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a question from Thomas LSA, who says, what is the estimated delivery date for M1 Abrams to Ukraine?
I think it was somewhere around August at this point, or September, which is still months away. And it was almost a year away when they originally announced that back in February. At least it seemed like that was really only half a year. But with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well, at least from what we understand. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $7 super chat from Putin will hang in the middle of the Kremlin, who's a longtime channel viewer, and thank you very much for that support. And there is no comment attached. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I thank you so much for the support, Putin will hang in the middle of the Kremlin, for helping this channel to keep on running and helping us to be able to do this as a job. And I thank you so much once again for support. You didn't leave a comment, but the support does say a lot, and it says to help keep this thing rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one. I hope I addressed that fairly well.
And our next question from the live chat goes to Tank and Dimples, who says, what happens if Russia fires Belarus's nukes without Belarus's permission, since they will be the one in control, and will Belarus face the consequences, or would Russia, or both?
Could you reread that one again? That one was kind of a little complicated.
They said, what happens if Russia fires Belarus's nukes without Belarus's permission, since they will be the one in control? Will Belarus face the consequences, or would Russia, or both?
I have a feeling they would both face consequences because we would probably consider them operating in tandem instead of as single individual countries. So they probably both end up facing nuclear Armageddon. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Judy Wilson, who says, are the Russian people able to get on YouTube still? If so, can they see how badly that they're losing the war, or is it all blocked?
Some of them can. If they're using a VPN. Most of them cannot, unfortunately. So some of them get an idea of how badly they're being blown away. Most people, though, in Russia, they don't really have that much of an idea as to how badly they're doing in the war, because all they hear is Russian state TV, and they don't really get to hear anything else like what we say on YouTube. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And we have a question from Susan Lowell, who says, any new fires in Moscow tonight?
Not tonight. We didn't see any at the moment, but there may be. It's just that we didn't see them on film. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a question from JDR24, who says, Enforcer, if Russia indeed gave Belarus operational nukes and gave them full control, does that violate any treaties that would trigger a full American and NATO response?
Sadly, no treaties that would trigger an immediate response, but it does violate nuclear non-proliferation treaties that we have signed with all nuclear countries decades ago, and I believe even just years ago, and it is in clear violation of those, and should be facing international condemnation because of that, but we're still not seeing that at the moment. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least based off of what I know, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a super chat. This time it's from Fly Eagles Fly, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you, Fly Eagles, for that support and also being a longtime channel viewer. He says, if you are self-employed and expect to owe $2,500 for the tax year, make estimated tax payments to the IRS to avoid a estimated tax penalty. The U.S. tax system is pay-as-you-go. Tip of the day. Love Ukraine. Oh, don't bring up taxes, please.
And I gotta thank you for the support, Fly Eagles Fly. Very interesting information, I must say. And I gotta thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. Folks like you make it possible. You make it possible for us to pay taxes at the end of the year. And so that, thank you so much once again. I hope that did address that the best we could. And Slava Ukraine. And thank you once again, Fly Eagles Fly, for being a channel legend. And with that, we are on to the next one.
I guess we'll have to start looking at it like payments toward Ukraine's defense, I guess.
Yeah, you know, or you know, it could be payments to a multitude of things. For example, paying $2,000 for a hammer. That's really only $5. You know, it could be anything like that. You know, it's the federal government, Matthew. The opportunities are endless. But with that,
and you gotta love the Fed. But with that, we are on to our next one, which goes to AF Kaplan, who says, any news regarding the Freedom for Russia forces, and is there any new activity in Belgorod?
We haven't heard any new news about the Russian Liberation Army, and we also have not heard a lot about their existence even at this point. It's like they've disappeared off the earth. From what we understand, though, they still hold the area, but beyond that, we don't really know anything else. And so with that, I hope that does address that at least the best I can, and with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to AD, who says, is there a chance that Belarus will use a Russian nuke for an attack against an unsuspecting close NATO country?
Probably not, because that would certainly invoke Article 4 and Article 5, and it wouldn't really be in question who it was. If it was a short-range nuke, it would immediately be associated with Russians. So I would have a feeling that would not be the case, because they would be scared of the consequences. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And we have another question from Judy Wilson, who says, do you think Putin will ever be tried for this war, or will he get away with all that's been done?
It depends on if he gets overthrown in a coup or not, or if he loses power. If he loses power, he may end up being held responsible for what he's done. If he stays in power, there will probably be no way to hold him responsible for what he's done. So it kind of just depends on what the future holds. And so with that, I hope that does address that at least the best I can to my knowledge. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Jeanette Littlehall, who says, have you been seeing an uptick in the U.S. military war games lately? They seem to be ramping up on all of them. All the branches are, I wonder. And what is going on? It seems more than usual.
I would say that they're probably just, you know, conducting training exercises. I mean, it's just a training exercise, guys. Calm down. There's nothing serious or concerning about this whatsoever.
I've heard that before.
I mean, it's just a training exercise. There's nothing going on. What happened? Honestly, I wouldn't really know. Usually whenever we start conducting a large amount of military exercises, it's to send a message to folks, but I don't really know who we're trying to send a message to at this point, and it really depends on where the war games are being held. Because whenever we're trying to send a message, we usually pull off the war games close to someone's borders, like in South Korea, or in the East China Sea, or in Europe. We do it somewhere like that, and I honestly wouldn't know where all of the war games are being conducted at the moment to know who the message is supposed to be sent to. But with that,
and we do the war games, we make this big appearance, and then we turn around and say, oh, but never mind, it was a hoax the whole time, bye-bye.
We sit there and go, we will defend Taiwan with our navy, send them there now, and then 2 months later we go, we never said Taiwan was an independent country. Yeah. And it's like, what?
We stoke the fire, we get it raged, and then we're like, okay, bye-bye.
Dude, they sat there, we sat there, and Taiwan said, man, these guys are bullying us. And we said, yeah, and Taiwan said, we ought to do something about it. Yeah, we ought to defend my island. Yeah, totally. All right, let's do it. Yep, you can do it. See ya. It's like, what? It's like, hold up. Wait a minute. Come back. But anyways, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Rabbit, who says, whatever happened to the red backpack dude in Mariupol?
We don't really know. He kind of he mostly was taken prisoner, from what I would assume, but we don't really know for certain. So with that, I hope that does address that to the best of my knowledge, and we are on to the next one.
And it looks like we have, let's see here. We have 2 more questions in the spreadsheet. So our next one goes to Thomas LSA, who says, do we know the number of helicopters Latvia is transferring to Ukraine? They said all, but how many do they have, and will they improve Ukraine's air dominance?
What happened? Reread the line.
He said, do we know the number of helicopters Latvia is transferring to Ukraine? And they said all, but how many do they have, and will they improve Ukraine's air dominance?
Unfortunately, I don't know how many the Latvians will be sending, but we can pull up Latvian equipment, Latvian military equipment, and we can probably get an idea of how many helicopters they have. Oh, wow. They have MP7s. They have Remington 870s, Winchester 1300s, and the Mossberg 500, like the one I have at home. That is literally the one I have at home. Like, that is the exact same one. But let's see here. What else do we got? We got the M16. Yo. Dude. That's literally the one I have at home. But anyways, let's scroll on down and find the chopper. Okay, this looks like their ground equipment. Let's see if we can find Latvian. We're looking for the Latvian Air Forces. Latvian Air Force equipment. Was apparently, oh, wow. Latvian, well, anyways, where in the hell's their equipment? Let's see, they have 3 Blackhawks, they have 3 Antonov 2s, and they have a Pellegrin Tarragon, and that's it. They have 2 of those. So, I would say maybe they'd help, but that's not really much. So I would say it's better than nothing, but I don't think it's going to be changing the war. But with that, hope that does address that fairly well, at least based off the information we can see. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was the lucky last person to throw in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is You're Taking My Life, a very dramatic username. And they said that the trucks. Damn. And they said that the trucks that shoot out those ropes of explosives for mine clearing, why don't they make one that shoots more than one at a time, like 5 or 6, to make a half-circle shape cleared?
That's an interesting idea. I don't really know why they don't do that. Maybe it's because there's not enough propellant behind the rocket that pulls it out there. That may be the reason why, but maybe if you bunch a whole load of them together, maybe it would work. So with that, I would say I don't really know why they wouldn't do that. It sounds like a good idea to me. But with that, hope that does answer that fairly well. And we have reached the end of tonight's stream, only being 2 hours and 58 minutes long. I'm highly honored. Okay. Okay. But I'm highly honored to know that 5.7 thousand of y'all hopped on tonight to listen to tonight's news. If y'all did enjoy, make sure to subscribe, make sure to the like button, and also make sure to comment, because it makes us pretty happy and it lets us know that people actually enjoy this channel. And also, we run this stream 6 days a week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time every single day except for Mondays. And we also make daily war summaries every single day, 7 days a week, which are about 2 to 3 minutes long and show some of the highlight clips of the day's activities, explaining what's going on. And so with that, good night, good luck, stay safe, take care, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army.
And good night, LSA. See you all tomorrow, and slow Ukraine.
Yes.
The Lee Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.